The ground beneath us holds more history than any book ever could. Beneath fields, deserts, forests, and modern streets lie the remains of worlds built by people whose names have long disappeared. Sometimes, only a wall emerges. Sometimes, an entire city. And sometimes, what archaeologists uncover raises more questions than the centuries of silence that came before it. Strange chambers appear behind familiar structures. Monumental stones reveal unexpected workmanship. Forgotten passages extend into places no one expected them to reach. Piece by piece, the ancient world continues to return to the surface, but never with all of its answers intact. Today, we follow these discoveries into places where the past has survived just enough to reveal its wonders, and just enough to preserve its mysteries. Quenco Chico, high in the Andes just outside Cusco, Peru, is a place where the builders did not simply place architecture on the landscape. They cut the landscape itself into architecture. At roughly 3,600 meters above sea level, a natural limestone outcrop was reshaped with stairs, flattened surfaces, basins, seat-like recesses, and other geometric cuts whose original purpose remains uncertain. Yet the strangest feature may not be any single carving. From part of the site, the southeastern horizon points toward the sacred mountain Ausangate, almost exactly where the sun rises at the December solstice. Quenco Chico, also written Quenco Chico, belongs to the larger archaeological landscape surrounding Cusco and lies close to the better-known Cuenco complex. It was documented through archaeological surveys and later examined in studies of Inca architecture and archaeoastronomy. By the time researchers recorded it in detail, however, substantial portions had already been damaged or lost, leaving the carved bedrock as one of the clearest surviving records of the site's original design. That surviving stone presents an unusual problem. Instead of leveling the outcrop and constructing an ordinary masonry building over it, the builders incorporated the limestone into the structure. Steps were cut directly into the rock, terraces occupied the surrounding ground, and sections of the outcrop were shaped into surfaces resembling benches or seats. Artificial depressions and basins appear elsewhere, while a stone stairway climbs toward the upper portion of the formation. These features required deliberate removal of bedrock, yet their arrangement does not produce an obvious domestic building, fortress, or conventional temple plan. Whatever once stood around them has largely disappeared, so the surviving carvings resemble the fixed components of a system whose movable and constructed parts are missing. The seat-like cuts illustrate the difficulty particularly well. Their form suggests places where a person could sit, but shape alone does not establish function. Similar modifications in the Inca world could form ritual platforms, places for offerings or architectural elements associated with sacred rocks. At Quenco Chico, their relationship with stairs, basins, and altered surfaces makes a purely practical explanation difficult to demonstrate. The builders were clearly controlling how people approached and occupied the outcrop, but the sequence of movement they intended can no longer be reconstructed with certainty. Water may have formed another part of that sequence. Researchers have recorded basins and a water source within the site, raising the possibility that liquids moved through at least some of its carved features. Cuenco is famous more broadly for channels cut into living rock, although popular claims that such channels carried blood or fermented chicha cannot be demonstrated simply from their shape. At Quenco Chico, the safer conclusion is more intriguing. Water, stone, and deliberately shaped surfaces existed together, but the surviving evidence does not reveal whether the basins served hydraulic, ceremonial, or combined purposes. A shallow cavity that now appears isolated may once have received water from a feature that no longer survives. The most remarkable clue appears only when the carved stone is considered together with the horizon. Archaeoastronomical measurements taken at Kenko Chico identified a southeastern line of sight toward Nevado ao Sangate, one of the dominant peaks of the Cusco region. The measured true azimuth toward the mountain was approximately 112.1 degrees. The calculated azimuth of sunrise around the December solstice was approximately 113.6 degrees. The difference is only about 1.5 degrees. That proximity does not prove that Kenko Chico was constructed as a solar observatory, and a difference of 1.5 degrees must be treated carefully because horizon altitude, the exact observation position, atmospheric refraction, and changes to the site can affect apparent alignments. Yet the possibility becomes harder to dismiss as meaningless when the cultural landscape is considered. Ao Sangate rises to about 6,384 meters and dominates the southeastern mountain world beyond Cusco. Mountains were not neutral scenery in Andean belief. Major peaks could function as powerful sacred entities associated with water, fertility, weather, and territory. If a deliberately modified place directed attention toward such a mountain at a significant solar turning point, the landscape itself could have become part of the architecture. The December solstice is especially important because it marks the southern extreme of the sun's annual rising position. From the latitude of Cusco, observers following sunrise through the year would see its position migrate along the eastern horizon before reaching an extreme and reversing direction. No sophisticated optical instrument is required to recognize this cycle. A fixed observation point, a mountain horizon, and repeated observations over many years are enough. What is difficult to determine is whether the builders intentionally encoded that cycle into Kenko Chico or whether the measured correspondence is coincidental. There is another feature that keeps the astronomical interpretation alive. Survey work has identified a stone element at the site as a possible gnomon, meaning a feature capable of casting a measurable shadow as the sun changes position. Calling it a possible gnomon is important because there is no surviving inscription explaining its function. Almost any projecting stone can cast a shadow, but at a place already containing carefully cut surfaces and a potential solstitial orientation, a deliberately positioned projection becomes more significant. If shadows were observed there, the upper surface of the outcrop may have worked not as a conventional observatory, but as a ritual space in which solar movement could be made visible against stone. This possibility changes how the apparently unrelated carvings can be interpreted. The stairs may have controlled access to a particular level. The flattened surfaces could have defined where people stood. Basins could have held or directed liquid. A projecting stone could have produced changing shadows. Beyond them, Ao Sangate occupied a fixed position on the horizon, while the rising sun shifted throughout the year. None of these elements independently proves a single integrated design, but their combination suggests that Kenko Chico cannot be understood simply by asking what each carved feature was used for in isolation. Even the orientation of movement through the site may matter. The principal stone stairway has been described as running approximately north to south. Elsewhere, the strongest horizon relationship lies toward the southeast. This means a person climbing through the carved architecture could have experienced changing sight lines rather than facing one direction continuously. In Inca ceremonial architecture, movement through space could connect built features with springs, rocks, and distant mountains, so the surrounding landscape was capable of functioning as part of a site's meaning rather than merely as its background. The greatest obstacle to testing this idea is preservation. Kenko Chico has lost enough architecture that the original relationship between carved bedrock and constructed walls is uncertain. Large stone blocks and terraces have been documented around the area, indicating that what survives was once embedded within a more substantial architectural setting. When walls disappear, a carved stairway may seem to lead nowhere. When an upper structure is lost, a basin may appear disconnected. When viewing positions are damaged, an alignment becomes much harder to evaluate. The strange appearance of Kenko Chiko may therefore result partly from looking at the permanent stone foundation of a much more complex place. This is why the 112.1-degree orientation toward Aosangate remains the most compelling unresolved feature. It provides something unusually measurable within a site dominated by uncertain functions. Researchers can record the direction of the mountain, calculate the solstitial sunrise, and establish that the two are close, but measurement alone cannot recover intention. There is no surviving text saying that an observer stood at this exact point waiting for the solstice sun, nor enough intact architecture to reconstruct every stage of whatever ceremony occurred there. Ancient ruins scattered across the forests of central Cambodia, about 200 kilometers north of Phnom Penh, have survived more than 13 centuries of monsoon rain, flooding, heat, and jungle invasion. Sambor Praekuk existed long before Angkor Wat and once served as one of the most important cities in Southeast Asia, a massive religious and political capital of the Chenla Kingdom during the 6th and 7th centuries. But the greatest mystery is not its age. It is the technology hidden inside its bricks. Many of these temples were built with joints so tight that almost no mortar can be seen between them, creating structures that survived longer than countless later buildings made with more advanced tools. Even today, archaeologists and material engineers still debate how these ancient builders achieved such precision in one of the harshest climates on Earth. French explorers first documented Sambor Praekuk in the 19th century during the colonial surveys of Cambodia, but dense jungle concealed much of the city for generations. Large-scale archaeological work expanded during the 20th century, revealing more than 100 temple structures spread across a vast urban landscape. Modern LiDAR scanning later uncovered roads, reservoirs, embankments, and hidden city layouts beneath the forest canopy, proving the settlement was far larger and more technologically organized than researchers once believed. The most astonishing feature of Sambor Praekuk is its brick construction. At first glance, many temple walls appear almost seamless, as if the bricks were fused together instead of stacked individually. In some sections, the joints between bricks are so thin they resemble machine-cut masonry, rather than handmade construction from the 7th century. This creates a major archaeological puzzle. Ancient Chenla builders did not possess modern steel cutting equipment, industrial kilns, or chemical cement. Yet many walls display an accuracy comparable to stonework seen in places such as Saxe Huaman or certain Roman imperial structures. Some gaps between bricks measure only a few millimeters. Even more surprising, many surfaces appear polished or blended together after construction, producing the illusion of a single continuous structure. Scientists have proposed several theories to explain this phenomenon. One theory suggests the builders used organic adhesives made from tree resin, plant sap, or sugar compounds mixed with ash and clay. Chemical traces discovered on some Southeast Asian temple bricks indicate the possible use of botanical binders. However, organic compounds normally decay quickly in humid tropical environments, making it difficult to explain how the structures remained stable for over 1,300 years. Another theory proposes that the bricks were partially ground and polished after placement, while still retaining moisture from firing. Experimental archaeology has shown that semi-fired clay bricks can sometimes be smoothed into tighter alignment before reaching full hardness. Yet reproducing the same precision consistently across massive temple walls remains extremely difficult, even for modern reconstruction teams. One of the most controversial hypotheses suggests the temples may have undergone secondary heating after assembly. In this scenario, the walls were exposed to controlled external heat that partially fused the outer brick surfaces together. Similar thermal bonding effects have been observed in some ancient kiln sites, though no conclusive evidence proves this occurred at Sambor-Pre-Kuk. What makes the mystery even more compelling is the survival rate of the bricks themselves. Cambodia's climate is extremely destructive to ancient materials. Average annual rainfall in central Cambodia exceeds 1,400 millimeters, while humidity levels regularly remain above 80%. Under such conditions, ordinary fired clay deteriorates rapidly through water absorption, biological growth, and thermal cracking. Yet many of Sambor-Pre-Kuk's bricks still retain remarkable hardness and their distinctive reddish-orange coloration. Some structures remain standing despite centuries of root penetration from enormous tropical trees. Engineers studying the material composition discovered that the clay appears unusually refined, with highly controlled particle distribution and firing consistency. Certain bricks may have been fired at temperatures approaching 900 to 1000 degrees Celsius, significantly hotter than many earlier Southeast Asian constructions. The durability becomes even more extraordinary when compared with later historical buildings. Numerous medieval brick structures across tropical Asia collapsed within a few centuries without constant maintenance. By contrast, sections of Sambor-Pre-Kuk survived wars, monsoon cycles, earthquakes, and biological erosion for over 1,300 years. Some material scientists argue that the Chenla builders may have understood clay selection and thermal treatment at a level far more sophisticated than previously assumed. If true, much of that knowledge may have been lost long before modern historians began studying the region. Another major mystery lies in the city's unusual octagonal temples. Most early religious architecture across Asia relied on square or rectangular layouts because they are structurally easier to stabilize. Circular and polygonal structures require more advanced load distribution and geometric planning. But Sambor-Pre-Kuk contains several enormous octagonal towers among the earliest known examples in Southeast Asia. Constructing octagonal buildings on soft tropical ground presents major engineering challenges. Weight must be distributed evenly across angled walls, and any imbalance can create progressive structural collapse. Even centuries later, many medieval builders avoided large polygonal structures because of these complications. Researchers believe the Chenla architects possessed surprisingly advanced geometric knowledge. Some scholars have suggested they used sophisticated rope measurement systems or modular proportional designs similar to methods later seen in Khmer architecture at Angkor Wat. The mystery becomes even greater because many octagonal towers remained upright despite centuries of flooding and soil movement. Without modern foundations or reinforced concrete, the survival of these structures remains difficult to fully explain. Most ancient civilizations carved decorative reliefs into stone because brick is fragile and prone to cracking. However, many structures at Sambor-Pre-Kuk feature highly detailed ornamental designs, seemingly integrated directly into the brick surfaces themselves. Researchers still debate whether these carvings were made before firing or after construction. If carved before firing, the artisans somehow predicted how much the clay would shrink during heating while preserving precise symmetry. If carved afterward, they managed to avoid large-scale cracking across brittle surfaces, something extremely difficult even with modern tools. The decorative motifs themselves are remarkably sophisticated. Floral spirals, mythical palace imagery, and intricate geometric patterns suggest a mature artistic tradition already existed centuries before the rise of Angkor. Some historians believe Sambor Pre Kuk represents the missing technological bridge between early Southeast Asian temple traditions and the later monumental achievements of the Khmer Empire. For decades, researchers believed Sambor Pre Kuk was simply a scattered religious complex hidden in the forest. Modern LiDAR technology completely transformed that understanding. Laser scanning revealed extensive urban planning buried beneath vegetation, including road systems, reservoirs, hydraulic embankments, canals, and organized settlement zones extending far beyond the visible temples. This discovery changed the historical timeline of early Cambodian civilization. Large-scale urban planning in the region may have emerged centuries earlier than previously believed. Some archaeologists now argue that Sambor Pre Kuk served as an experimental prototype for the hydraulic and urban engineering systems later perfected at Angkor. If true, the technological roots of the Khmer Empire may stretch much deeper into history than scholars once imagined. The city's disappearance is equally mysterious. Historical records from the Chenla period are fragmented and incomplete. No single catastrophe fully explains why such an advanced urban center gradually faded into the jungle. Warfare, trade shifts, environmental stress, or political transformation may all have contributed. But the silence left behind only deepened the mystery. Do you think the Chenla builders truly possessed construction technology far ahead of their time? Or is there still a hidden secret behind Sambor Pre Kuk that modern history has yet to uncover? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Chile's Atacama Desert, one of the driest places on Earth, is home to the ancient fortress of Pucará de la Serna, a structure that has survived for nearly 8 centuries. Built from stone without mortar, surrounded by scorching heat, violent temperature shifts, and almost no rainfall, the site should not have lasted this long. Yet more than 100 stone structures remain visible today. What makes the fortress truly mysterious is not only its survival, but the possibility that its builders possessed engineering knowledge far more advanced than historians once believed. The ruins became known to modern archaeologists during 19th and early 20th century surveys of northern Chile. Located nearly 2,500 meters above sea level overlooking the lower river canyon, the site immediately attracted attention because of its strategic position. Early explorers believed it was simply a defensive settlement used by the Atacameño people before the arrival of the Inca Empire. But every excavation revealed something unexpected. Researchers discovered tightly organized residential sectors, defensive choke points, elevated observation positions, and evidence of water management systems. Instead of a primitive hill fort, Pucará de la Serna appeared more like a carefully engineered desert stronghold. The first major surveys mapped more than 100 interconnected stone structures built along the cliffside. Later excavations uncovered narrow corridors intentionally designed to slow invading forces. Archaeologists then found storage areas suggesting long-term occupation, rather than temporary military use. Further studies identified agricultural terraces near the lower river, proving the population had developed methods to survive in an environment receiving less than 15 millimeters of rainfall annually in some regions. More recent geological analysis showed the builders selected specific stone types capable of resisting thermal stress caused by extreme desert conditions. Each new discovery transformed the fortress from a simple archaeological ruin into a growing technological mystery. The Atacama Desert is often compared to the surface of Mars. NASA has used parts of the region to test rover equipment because of its hyper-arid conditions. Some weather stations in the Atacama have recorded years without measurable rainfall. Ultraviolet radiation levels are among the highest ever measured on Earth. Yet ancient people not only survived here, they built a fortified settlement capable of supporting an organized community. That raises a major question. How did they solve the environmental challenges without metal infrastructure, advanced machinery, or modern science? The answer may lie in engineering techniques hidden within the fortress itself. One of the greatest mysteries surrounding Pucará de la Serna is the durability of its stone architecture. Many walls remain standing despite centuries of seismic activity, desert winds, salt weathering, and violent temperature changes between day and night. The builders used volcanic rock and local sandstone fitted together without large amounts of mortar. Modern engineers know that extreme thermal expansion can crack rigid stone structures over time. In desert regions, temperature fluctuations exceeding 20 degrees Celsius within hours place enormous stress on building materials. Yet many walls at Lasana show surprisingly limited structural collapse. Some researchers believe the builders intentionally used irregular polygonal stone fitting to distribute pressure more efficiently. Similar techniques later appeared in Inca stonework at sites like Sacsayhuaman, where massive stones interlock so tightly that even blades cannot pass between them. The mystery is that Pucará de la Sarnia predates some of these later engineering traditions. At first glance, the fortress appears chaotic, but aerial analysis revealed a highly strategic layout. Instead of relying on massive outer walls like medieval European castles, the fortress used layered defensive corridors and elevated attack positions. Many passageways are barely wide enough for a single adult to pass through. Invaders entering these narrow channels would have been exposed from above while unable to maneuver effectively. Military historians compare this design to modern urban choke point tactics used in asymmetric warfare. What makes this remarkable is that the builders had no known access to advanced surveying instruments. Yet the geometry of the pathways maximise visibility while minimising vulnerable angles. Some defensive sectors appear positioned specifically to create overlapping fields of attack, a principle still used in modern military fortifications. The fortress also demonstrates surprisingly advanced environmental engineering. Despite intense daytime heat, many interior structures maintain cooler temperatures than the surrounding desert. Researchers studying traditional Andean architecture noticed that thick stone walls acted as thermal batteries. During the day, the walls absorbed heat slowly. At night, they released that heat gradually as temperatures dropped. This passive climate control system resembles techniques used in modern, sustainable desert architecture. Some buildings also appear aligned with prevailing canyon winds, creating natural ventilation channels. Even slight airflow becomes critical in desert environments where direct solar exposure can rapidly overheat enclosed spaces. The fact that ancient builders understood these principles centuries before modern thermodynamics remains difficult to explain. Perhaps the greatest mystery of all is water. No civilization survives in the Atacama without controlling water with extreme precision. Archaeologists discovered irrigation channels, agricultural terraces, and evidence of controlled water distribution connected to the nearby lower river. But the efficiency of these systems continues to puzzle researchers. In hyper-arid environments, evaporation rates are extremely high. Water loss through seepage and exposure can destroy agricultural productivity quickly. Yet the inhabitants maintained stable occupation for generations. Some channels appear intentionally angled to reduce water velocity and minimize erosion. Stone-lined sections may also have reduced seepage into dry soil. These are practical hydraulic engineering solutions rarely associated with small pre-Columbian desert communities. The sophistication of these systems suggests long-term experimentation and accumulated environmental knowledge over centuries. Another mystery involves the fortress's strategic location. The lower corridor connected mining regions, trade routes, and desert caravan paths across northern Chile. Archaeologists believe copper, minerals, obsidian, and other valuable resources moved through this region long before European arrival. That may explain why such a heavily defended settlement existed in an otherwise hostile environment. Some theories suggest Pucará de la Sarnia functioned not only as a military fortress, but as a control point overseeing trade and mineral transport through the desert. If true, the site may have held economic importance far beyond its size. This would also explain the unusually sophisticated defensive planning. Modern analysis of surviving structures revealed something else unexpected. The builders may have deliberately selected stones with better resistance to desert weathering. Certain volcanic rocks tolerate thermal expansion and ultraviolet exposure better than softer sedimentary materials. Choosing the wrong material in the Atacama would lead to rapid cracking and erosion over time. Yet many sections of the fortress remain structurally stable after hundreds of years. This suggests practical geological knowledge based not on formal science, but on generations of observation and experimentation. In other words, the builders may have understood their environment with a level of precision history has underestimated. What do you think was the most mysterious part of Pucará de la Sana? The advanced stone engineering, the desert water systems, or the fortress design itself? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. The Tanit Temple of Kirkwane in Tunisia stands among the most intriguing surviving religious structures of the ancient Punic world. Located inside the remarkably well-preserved Punic city of Kirkwane on the Cap Bon Peninsula, this sanctuary was dedicated to the powerful Carthaginian goddess Tanit, a deity associated with fertility, protection, and celestial power in the civilization of Carthage. What makes the temple particularly fascinating is not merely its religious symbolism but the surprising engineering sophistication embedded within its construction. Despite being built more than 2,000 years ago, most likely between the 4th and 3rd centuries BCE, the structural remains reveal an advanced Punic building technology whose durability continues to puzzle archaeologists today. Among all the mysteries surrounding the site, the most remarkable involves the unusually resilient stone and brick construction techniques used by Punic builders, techniques that allowed the sanctuary's foundations and walls to survive in a harsh coastal environment where many ancient structures would normally have deteriorated long ago. The ruins of Kirkwane were first systematically identified in the early 20th century, with major excavations conducted during the 1950s and 1960s by French and Tunisian archaeological teams. Unlike many ancient cities of North Africa that were later rebuilt by Roman settlers, Kirkwane was abandoned after its destruction during the First Punic War and was never significantly reoccupied. Because of this unusual historical circumstance, the archaeological layers remained relatively undisturbed, allowing researchers to study a Punic city in a state close to its original condition. Within this preserved urban layout, the Tanit Temple appears as a sacred complex integrated into a carefully planned neighborhood of houses, workshops, and ritual spaces. Excavations uncovered stone altars, courtyards, and foundations constructed with a combination of limestone blocks, fired bricks, and a distinctive lime-based mortar, whose composition has become one of the most intriguing technological puzzles of the site. One of the first observations made by archaeologists studying the temple was the exceptional stability of its construction materials. Kirkwane lies only a short distance from the Mediterranean shoreline, an environment characterized by salt-laden winds, seasonal humidity, and strong coastal erosion, conditions that typically accelerate the decay of ancient masonry. Yet the walls and foundations of the Tanit sanctuary remain surprisingly intact even after more than 2 millennia. In several sections of the temple complex, the stone blocks retain their original alignment with minimal displacement, suggesting that the builders employed a construction method capable of resisting both environmental degradation and ground movement. Laboratory analyses of mortar samples conducted during archaeological studies in the late 20th century revealed a mixture dominated by lime and finely crushed aggregates, possibly including marine sand and mineral additives. Although the exact proportions are still debated, some researchers believe that the Punic masons may have developed a specialized mortar designed to withstand moisture and salt infiltration. This discovery has led to comparisons with another famous ancient building technology, the hydraulic concrete used by the Romans centuries later. Roman maritime structures, such as the harbour installations at Portus, are known to have relied on volcanic ash and lime to create a durable concrete capable of hardening underwater. While the Punic builders at Kirkuen did not produce concrete in exactly the same form, the resilience of their masonry suggests a similar understanding of mineral chemistry. Some archaeologists have proposed that the lime mortar used in the Tanit Temple may have included naturally reactive materials that increased its strength over time. If this hypothesis is correct, the Punic engineers may have possessed empirical knowledge of long-lasting construction compounds long before Roman engineers refined comparable techniques. Equally intriguing is the precise arrangement of stone blocks within the temple's structural framework. Many of the surviving walls display carefully cut limestone blocks laid in tight horizontal courses with minimal gaps between them. Measurements conducted during architectural surveys indicate that the alignment of certain foundation lines deviates by only a few centimeters across several meters of wall length, a level of precision that implies deliberate planning and skilled craftsmanship. For comparison, similar levels of stone block accuracy are often associated with monumental Mediterranean structures, such as the Greek temples at Temple of Hera at Paestum. Yet the Punic sanctuary at Kirkuen was built in a relatively modest urban environment, rather than as an enormous monumental complex. This raises an important question. How did Punic builders achieve such geometric consistency, using the relatively simple tools available during the classical period? Another remarkable feature of the Tanit Temple is the integration of stone construction with fired brick elements. Archaeologists discovered that certain interior structures and partitions were built from rectangular bricks, bonded with lime mortar, forming stable surfaces that complemented the heavier limestone foundations. This hybrid technique appears to have provided both structural strength and architectural flexibility. In several sections of the sanctuary, bricklayers were used to create level platforms or raised ritual spaces around altars. Because fired bricks are lighter than large stone blocks, their use would have reduced stress on the foundation, while still allowing builders to construct elevated ceremonial features. Interestingly, the dimensions of the bricks discovered at Kirkuen appear relatively standardized, suggesting the existence of organized production methods within the Punic city. Excavations conducted in the 1970s and later decades also revealed drainage channels and small basins near the temple courtyard, indicating that the builders incorporated water management into the design of the sanctuary. These channels were carved into stone or lined with masonry, and appear to have been carefully angled to guide water away from the ritual areas. Although the slopes are subtle, often only a few degrees, they are sufficient to ensure steady drainage during rainfall. This demonstrates that Punic architects understood the importance of protecting sacred structures from water accumulation, which could weaken foundations over time. Such attention to environmental durability further emphasizes the technical sophistication behind the temple's construction. In addition to structural engineering, the temple complex contains symbolic carvings associated with the goddess Tanit. The well-known Tanit symbol, often depicted as a triangular figure topped by a circle and crossed by a horizontal bar, appears on stones and ritual surfaces throughout the site. These engravings are cut with notable consistency and depth, suggesting that artisans used hardened metal chisels capable of carving precise lines into limestone. While iron tools were available during the Punic period, relatively few examples have been recovered from the site, leaving open questions about the exact techniques used to produce these carvings. Perhaps the greatest archaeological mystery surrounding the Tanit Temple arises from the abrupt historical fate of Kirkuen itself. During the First Punic War between Rome and Carthage, the city was likely destroyed or abandoned around the middle of the 3rd century BCE. Unlike Carthage, which was later rebuilt and transformed into a major Roman centre, Kirkuen was never extensively resettled. As a result, its buildings, including the Tanit Sanctuary, remained frozen in time beneath layers of sand and soil. When archaeologists uncovered the site centuries later, they encountered an unusually intact Punic urban landscape, providing a rare glimpse into a civilization that left few written architectural records. What secret building technology might the Punic engineers have known that we still don't fully understand today? Tell us your theory in the comments below. On a windswept plateau nearly 1,000 meters above sea level in northern Spain, a small Celtiberian city once forced the Roman Republic into one of the longest and most humiliating wars in its history. Numantia was not protected by giant pyramids or impossible megaliths. Its greatest mystery was something far more dangerous: a level of military engineering, logistics, and metallurgy that seemed completely out of proportion for an Iron Age tribal settlement. For almost 20 years, Rome could not break it. The ruins of Numantia were identified in the 19th century after years of debate over its true location. Systematic excavations began in 1905 under German archaeologist Adolf Schulten, whose work uncovered defensive walls, streets, weapons, storage pits, and traces of one of the largest Roman siege operations ever attempted against a single city. To understand why Numantia became legendary, the scale of Rome must be understood first. By the 2nd century BCE, Rome had already defeated Carthage, conquered much of the Mediterranean, and fielded professional armies capable of engineering roads, bridges, siege towers, and massive fortifications across entire continents. Roman military discipline was so effective that most tribal settlements collapsed rapidly once surrounded, yet Numantia resisted for nearly 2 decades. Ancient Roman sources describe repeated Roman defeats, failed assaults, destroyed supply lines, and commanders humiliated by a settlement that may have contained only 4,000 to 8,000 inhabitants. Some estimates place the defending force at barely 2,000 warriors during certain periods of the conflict. That imbalance is staggering. Modern comparisons help reveal how unusual this was. It would be similar to a small, isolated mountain town repeatedly defeating offensives from the strongest military power on Earth. Rome eventually became so frustrated that it sent Scipio Aemilianus, the same commander who destroyed Carthage in 146 BCE, specifically to end the Numantine resistance once and for all. Even then, he avoided direct assault. That decision alone reveals how dangerous Numantia had become. Unlike famous ancient cities surrounded by gigantic stone walls, Numantia relied heavily on terrain optimization. The city stood on elevated ground between river valleys near the upper Duero basin. Archaeological studies show that its fortifications were integrated directly into the natural topography. Instead of relying on monument-sized walls, the defenders created narrow access corridors, steep approach angles, and layered defensive positions that forced attackers into exposed kill zones. This type of terrain warfare resembles much later military principles used in medieval hill forts and even modern mountain defense systems. Excavations revealed strategically positioned walls following slope geometry, controlled entry points, elevated observation lines, and defensive structures adapted to natural cliffs and ravines. What makes this mysterious is the sophistication of the planning. The Celtiberians were traditionally described by Roman writers as loosely organized tribal groups, yet Numantia demonstrates an advanced understanding of defensive architecture and battlefield control. Some archaeologists compare aspects of the site to Gallic hill fort engineering, but Numantia appears unusually optimized for long-term resistance. Its builders understood something critical. A fortress does not need massive walls if the landscape itself becomes the weapon. When Scipio arrived around 134 BCE, he abandoned the standard Roman approach of direct attack. Instead, he launched one of the most ambitious siege operations of the ancient world. Roman forces constructed multiple military camps, ditches, towers, wooden barriers, fortified walls, and river blockades. The encirclement stretched roughly 9 kilometers around the city. Some historians estimate the Roman force may have exceeded 50,000 soldiers and auxiliaries during parts of the campaign. That means Rome used an army potentially larger than the entire population of Numantia itself. But the real mystery is not the Roman siege. It is how Numantia survived it. Archaeological evidence suggests the inhabitants endured conditions that should have caused collapse much earlier. Excavations uncovered underground storage pits, grain reserves, and organized urban layouts suggesting highly efficient rationing systems. Researchers still debate several unresolved questions. Did Numantia possess hidden supply tunnels? Were there concealed external trade routes? Did the city develop advanced food preservation methods? How did such a small population manage resources so effectively under total isolation? Some storage structures discovered at the site indicate careful temperature control using underground chambers. Similar systems appear in other Iron Age settlements, but Numantia's apparent endurance suggests logistics far beyond what Rome expected. This transforms the story from simple warfare into something deeper, a battle of engineering, endurance, and systems management. One reason Rome struggled was because the Numantians refused to fight conventionally. Roman armies excelled in organized battlefield formations. Their strength depended on discipline, formation cohesion, and large-scale logistics. The defenders of Numantia attacked those exact weaknesses. Historical accounts describe ambush tactics, rapid raids, night attacks, supply disruption, hit-and-run warfare, and terrain manipulation. These tactics resemble modern asymmetric warfare more than traditional ancient battles. Instead of confronting Roman legions head-on, the Celtiberians forced Rome into a prolonged war of exhaustion. Some military historians argue that Numantia demonstrated an advanced understanding of strategic attrition centuries before such concepts became formalized in military theory. This is one of the most overlooked mysteries surrounding the city. Numantia may represent evidence that Iron Age tribal societies possessed far more sophisticated military intelligence than Roman sources admitted. Among all the mysteries surrounding Numantia, the most technically fascinating may be its metallurgy. Roman armies eventually adopted weapons inspired by Iberian blades. The famous Gladius Hispaniensis, one of Rome's deadliest swords, was influenced heavily by Hispano-Celtic designs developed in Iberia. This is extraordinary. Rome, the dominant military power of the ancient world, was copying weapon technology from the very people it considered barbarians. Archaeometallurgical studies suggest Celtiberian smiths achieved surprisingly high-quality steel production for the period. Analyses of surviving blades from Iberian regions reveal strong carbon distribution, flexible yet durable structures, advanced forging consistency, and an excellent balance between hardness and elasticity. In practical terms, this meant the swords could absorb impact without shattering while maintaining sharp cutting edges. That balance is extremely difficult to achieve without careful heat control. The mystery is how Celtiberian blacksmiths managed it. Iron production in the 2nd century BCE normally suffered from inconsistent furnace temperatures and impurities. Yet some Iberian weapons demonstrate metallurgical qualities far ahead of expectations for decentralized tribal societies. Several theories attempt to explain this. Unusually rich local ore deposits, inherited metallurgical traditions from earlier Mediterranean trade networks, multi-stage forging techniques, and advanced quenching and tempering methods. But no complete consensus exists. Experimental archaeologists attempting to recreate Celtiberian blades discovered that producing similar flexibility requires remarkably precise temperature management. Even small errors during forging can ruin the metal structure completely. Some reconstructed Iberian swords performed so effectively in tests that researchers compared them favorably against early Roman weapon designs. This creates an uncomfortable historical question. If Celtiberian metallurgy was this advanced, how much ancient technological knowledge has been underestimated simply because it belonged to cultures outside the major empires? Numantia may not have possessed giant monuments, but it may have possessed something even more dangerous: industrial knowledge capable of rivaling Rome itself. After months of complete encirclement, starvation finally overwhelmed Numantia in 133 BCE. Ancient accounts claim many inhabitants chose death over surrender, with some reportedly burning their possessions and parts of the city rather than becoming Roman slaves. Archaeological evidence confirms intense destruction layers across the settlement, but even here, mysteries remain. Excavations suggest multiple burn phases instead of a single fire, implying the city may have endured repeated destruction and rapid reconstruction throughout the war. Some surviving structures also reveal mixed wood and stone construction techniques that may have improved flexibility and shock absorption during attacks. Once again, Numantia appears far more technically advanced than expected for an Iron Age tribal settlement. Do you think Numantia was simply a small tribal city, or proof that ancient civilizations possessed technologies and military knowledge far beyond what history admits? Share your thoughts in the comments below. In central Portugal, beneath quiet farmland near Coimbra, lies Conimbriga, a Roman city whose engineering still confuses archaeologists. Beneath broken columns and faded mosaics are hydraulic systems, waterproof materials, and colour preservation techniques that survive nearly 2,000 years. Some of them continue functioning better than materials used in parts of the modern world today. Conimbriga is located about 16 kilometres south of Coimbra in Portugal. Although local villagers had known about strange ruins for centuries, systematic excavations only began in the late 19th century. Major archaeological work intensified during the 1930s and again in the 1960s, when researchers uncovered entire villas, baths, aqueduct systems, workshops, and streets preserved beneath layers of soil. Each excavation revealed something unexpected. First came the mosaics, then the hydraulic channels, then entire residential districts with sophisticated drainage and heating systems. Archaeologists realized Conimbriga was not a small provincial outpost. At its peak during the 2nd and 3rd centuries AD, it was one of the most technologically advanced Roman settlements in Western Iberia. What shocked researchers most was not the scale of the city, but the precision of its engineering. Roman cities are famous for aqueducts, but Conimbriga's hydraulic network appears unusually refined even by Roman standards. Engineers discovered underground pipes, pressure balancing tanks, filtration channels, fountains and drainage systems all integrated into a carefully controlled network. Some channels maintain gradients so precise that the difference in elevation changes by only a few centimeters across long distances. Modern hydraulic engineers note that even small errors in slope could have stopped water flow entirely or caused destructive pressure buildup. Yet the system functioned continuously for centuries. Researchers compared parts of the network to modern gravity-fed water systems. In some areas, the pressure stabilization resembles principles still used in urban plumbing design today. The mystery is how Roman surveyors achieved such accuracy without laser instruments, electronic leveling equipment, or digital mapping. The Romans did possess tools like the chorobates and groma, but many archaeologists argue those devices alone may not fully explain the precision seen at Conimbriga. Especially puzzling is how they adapted the water network to uneven terrain while maintaining stable flow across residential districts.
Even more impressive, parts of the drainage system still direct rainwater effectively after nearly 2 millennia. Summer temperatures in central Portugal regularly exceed 35 degrees Celsius, yet excavations inside several Roman villas at Coimbra revealed architectural designs capable of naturally cooling interior spaces. The city's elite houses were built around central courtyards containing pools and gardens. Narrow corridors directed airflow through shaded stone passageways before entering living areas. Water evaporation from pools lowered surrounding temperatures, while thick masonry walls absorbed daytime heat and released it slowly at night. Modern simulations suggest these combined techniques could reduce perceived indoor temperatures by 5 to 8 degrees Celsius without any mechanical system. This was not random architecture. Researchers noticed repeated design patterns across multiple villas, implying standardized knowledge of airflow and thermal regulation. In some rooms, window placement appears intentionally aligned with prevailing seasonal winds. Certain walls were even angled to minimize direct summer sunlight while maximizing winter illumination. Some historians compare these methods to passive cooling systems later used in Persian desert cities such as Yazd. But Coimbra demonstrates that Roman engineers may also have mastered advanced environmental design far beyond what many people imagine. The real mystery is whether this knowledge was based purely on experience, or on mathematical understanding of airflow and heat transfer centuries ahead of its time. The greatest mystery at Coimbra may be its extraordinary material durability. Many mosaics still retain vivid reds, blacks, yellows, and deep blues despite nearly 2,000 years of rain, humidity, biological growth and temperature fluctuations. Some waterproof surfaces continue resisting moisture better than modern cement repairs applied during the 20th century. Scientists analysing mortar samples found mixtures containing lime, sand, crushed ceramics, volcanic ash, and regional minerals combined in extremely specific proportions. Under microscopic examination, certain compounds formed interlocking crystalline structures remarkably resistant to water penetration. This has led researchers to compare Roman mortar at Coimbra with the famous Roman marine concrete found in Mediterranean harbours. Studies published in recent years showed ancient Roman concrete sometimes grows stronger over time because seawater triggers mineral reactions that reinforce the internal structure. At Coimbra, however, the environment is different. Instead of seawater exposure, the materials survived cycles of rain, summer heat, winter cooling, biological erosion, and soil pressure. Yet many layers remain astonishingly intact. One theory suggests Roman builders intentionally created slow chemical reactions within the mortar, allowing the material to continue stabilizing for centuries. Some scientists compare this behavior to experimental, self-healing concrete technologies being developed today. The mosaics themselves create another mystery. Tiny tesserae stones, some only a few millimeters wide, were arranged with extraordinary geometric consistency. Many pigments retain their brightness because Roman craftsmen may have chemically bonded mineral colours into wet plaster before curing occurred. Certain black pigments appear derived from manganese-rich minerals. Reds often came from iron oxides. Yellows may have originated from ochre compounds stabilised through controlled heating. What remains unclear is how Roman artisans prevented these colours from degrading under ultraviolet exposure and moisture for almost 2,000 years. Even modern restorers struggle to replicate the same longevity. In some reconstructed sections using contemporary materials, fading and cracking appeared within decades. Meanwhile, original Roman surfaces nearby remain stable. That contradiction continues to puzzle conservation scientists today. Coimbra contains some of the most intricate Roman mosaics in Europe. Certain floors contain tens of thousands of tesserae, arranged into mathematically precise geometric patterns. Researchers studying the layouts noticed recurring proportional systems similar to advanced geometric planning. Some designs appear to follow ratios close to what later became known as the golden ratio. Circular symmetries remain consistent across entire rooms with extremely low deviation. The astonishing part is the execution speed implied by the scale of construction. Without computer projection, laser alignment, or industrial measuring tools, Roman craftsmen maintained alignment accuracy across surfaces spanning dozens of square meters. Some archaeologists believe artisans may have used hidden guide grids or chalk mapping systems now lost to history. Others argue the precision reflects generations of specialized mathematical training among Roman mosaic workshops. Yet no surviving Roman manual fully explains how such complex compositions were planned and transferred onto floors with this level of consistency. Aerial surveys and modern mapping reveal that Canimbriga was not organized randomly. Streets, drainage routes, public buildings, and residential zones appear positioned according to carefully optimized spatial logic. Road orientation maximized sunlight during winter while reducing heat accumulation during summer. Water systems interconnected with residential density zones. Waste channels were separated from freshwater supply routes with unusual efficiency for the ancient world. Some urban historians compare parts of the city layout to principles used in modern sustainable city planning. The Romans essentially engineered Canimbriga as a coordinated environmental system. This becomes even more impressive considering the city was designed without satellite imagery, computer simulations, or modern surveying technology. Do you think the ancient world once possessed engineering knowledge far beyond what modern history admits? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. In the dry Casma Valley of northern Peru, more than 300 kilometers north of Lima, archaeologists uncovered something that looked less like a temple and more like a warning carved into stone. Massive walls covered with dismembered human bodies, severed heads, exposed ribs, spinal columns, intestines, and warriors holding clubs stared back from the desert. The site was called Cerro Sachin, and the deeper researchers dug, the stranger it became. The first scientific investigations began in the 1930s, when Peruvian archaeologist Julio C. Tello explored the region and identified the site as one of the oldest monumental complexes in Peru. Later excavations in the 1960s and 70s uncovered dozens of carved monoliths surrounding the structure, along with buried construction phases beneath the visible temple. Each excavation revealed something unexpected. One layer showed earlier adobe architecture hidden underneath later stone walls. Another exposed drainage systems engineered to survive seasonal floods. More recent studies using radiocarbon dating pushed the site's age back to nearly 4,000 years old, placing parts of Cerro Sachin around 1800 to 1500 BCE, older than most major civilizations in the Americas. That timeline alone created controversy. At the time Cerro Sachin was active, the Egyptian New Kingdom had not yet reached its peak, the Assyrian Empire did not exist, and the Olmec civilization in Mesoamerica had not yet emerged. Yet in a relatively isolated Peruvian valley, a society was already constructing large-scale ceremonial architecture with precision-cut volcanic stone and highly organized urban planning. The biggest mystery surrounding Cerro Sachin is not simply its age, but the technical sophistication hidden inside the structure. The outer walls of the temple are lined with hundreds of carved stone slabs made primarily from andesite, a dense volcanic rock significantly harder than limestone. Andesite ranks around 6 to 7 on the Mohs hardness scale, meaning it is difficult even for modern steel tools to shape cleanly. Yet the carvings at Cerro Sachin contain deep grooves, curved anatomical details, symmetrical facial proportions, and repeated patterns extending across enormous stone surfaces. The problem is that the Sekine culture supposedly lacked advanced metallurgy. Archaeologists believe most of their tools were made from stone hammer tools, harder minerals, bone implements, and possibly primitive copper. No evidence of iron or steel technology has ever been found at the site. Even today, replicating some of these carvings using only stone tools requires enormous labor and precision. Experimental archaeologists attempting similar carving techniques found that producing a single detailed relief panel using primitive tools could take weeks or even months of continuous work. But Cerro Sachin contains hundreds of them. Even more puzzling is the consistency. Many of the carved blocks appear standardized in size and layout, suggesting centralized planning rather than random artistic decoration. The slabs fit together with remarkable precision, especially considering the civilization had no wheeled transport, no horses, and no known mechanical lifting systems. Some individual stones weigh several tons. Researchers still debate how these blocks were transported across the valley floor and lifted into place with such accuracy. This logistical mystery resembles engineering problems seen thousands of years later at Sacsayhuaman and Pumapunku, where massive stones were moved and aligned with techniques that remain partially unexplained. But Cerro Sachin predates both sites by well over a millennium. Then there are the carvings themselves. Unlike most ancient ceremonial art, the reliefs at Cerro Sachin are disturbingly anatomical. They do not simply depict dead enemies. They show dissected bodies with exposed vertebrae, severed limbs, internal organs, eyeballs connected by optic nerves, and blood flowing from neck wounds. Some figures appear to hold human heads like trophies. Others display what looks almost like surgical precision in the representation of muscles and skeletal structures. This level of anatomical understanding is deeply unusual for such an early civilization. In Europe, detailed anatomical studies would not emerge systematically until thousands of years later. Even many later civilizations represented the human body symbolically rather than biologically. Yet the Sachin carvings show repeated attention to realistic internal structures. Some researchers argue this knowledge came from ritual sacrifice or warfare. Others believe the carvings may represent cosmological symbolism tied to death and agricultural cycles. But there is still no consensus on why the imagery is so graphic or why it appears at such an early stage of Andean civilization. Another mystery involves the function of the complex itself. At first glance, Cerro Sachin resembles a ceremonial temple, but its architectural layout differs from many known Andean sacred centers. The main structure surrounds a sunken central area, enclosed by walls of carved stone. Some archaeologists believe this space may have functioned as a ritual arena where public ceremonies, sacrifices, or displays of political power took place. What makes this theory unsettling is the scale of violence represented in the carvings. If the imagery reflects real events, Cerro Sachin may preserve evidence of organized warfare in the Americas far earlier than historians once believed possible. Traditional models suggested early Andean societies were primarily agricultural and relatively cooperative. Cerro Sachin challenges that narrative completely. The engineering beneath the structure raises even more questions. Peru lies directly on the Pacific Ring of Fire, one of the most seismically active regions on Earth. Over the last several thousand years, the region has experienced countless earthquakes, powerful enough to destroy cities. Yet major sections of Cerro Sachin survived. Archaeologists discovered layered construction techniques beneath the temple, including compacted fill materials and carefully distributed stone weight that may have helped absorb seismic shock. Some engineers studying ancient Andean architecture believe the builders intentionally designed the structure to resist earthquakes through flexibility and mass distribution. If true, this would mean the Sekine people understood practical seismic engineering thousands of years before modern structural science formally existed. The site also contains evidence of advanced hydraulic planning. Excavations uncovered drainage channels designed to redirect seasonal water flows away from the structure. This was critical in the Chasma Valley, where periodic El Niño climate events could suddenly transform dry terrain into destructive flood zones. Similar water control sophistication appears later at major Andean centers, but Cerro Sekine represents one of the earliest known examples. Then, almost as mysteriously as it appeared, the civilization declined. Around 1500 BCE, major construction activity slowed. Later cultures occupied parts of the valley, but Cerro Sekine gradually lost importance. Some researchers blame environmental instability caused by powerful El Niño cycles. Geological evidence suggests catastrophic flooding may have damaged agricultural systems across the region. Others suspect internal conflict or warfare contributed to the collapse. Do you think Cerro Sekine was simply an ancient ceremonial center, or could it be evidence that some of humanity's earliest civilizations were far more advanced than we ever imagined? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Rising above the rugged ridges of the Rhodope Mountains in southern Bulgaria, the ancient rock city of Paperikon stands as one of the most enigmatic archaeological sites in southeastern Europe. Perched roughly 470 meters above sea level, this vast complex of temples, halls, stairways, and fortifications carved directly into the bedrock has puzzled historians and archaeologists for decades. Evidence suggests that human activity at the site began as early as the late Neolithic period, possibly around the 5th millennium BCE, making it older than many famous sacred centers of the Mediterranean world. Over thousands of years, the location evolved into a major spiritual and political hub, especially during the era of the Thracians, an ancient Indo-European people who inhabited large parts of the Balkans long before the rise of classical Greece and Rome. Yet what makes Paperikon particularly fascinating is not only its age or religious significance, but the astonishing engineering effort required to shape an entire mountain summit into a functioning urban and ceremonial complex. Excavations carried out since the early 21st century, particularly under the leadership of Bulgarian archaeologist Nikolai Ovcharov, have revealed a sprawling stone city covering more than 10,000 square meters. Within this area, researchers have uncovered a labyrinth of rock-cut chambers, ceremonial courtyards, massive staircases, drainage channels, and what appears to be a palace complex overlooking the surrounding valley. The site also includes remnants of fortification walls built during later historical periods, when Roman and Byzantine authorities occupied the region. However, the core of Paperikon is far older and far more mysterious. An intricate sacred precinct carved directly from the natural stone of the mountain itself. At the center lies a large circular altar believed to have been associated with the cult of Dionysus, the Thracian Greek god of wine, ecstasy, and prophecy. Ancient writers described an oracle of Dionysus somewhere in the Rhodope Mountains that rivaled the prestige of the famous sanctuary at Oracle of Delphi. Some historians even speculate that Alexander the Great may have consulted such an oracle before launching his campaigns into Asia, though definitive proof remains elusive. Despite these historical references, the most perplexing aspect of Paperikon is the technology required to construct it. Unlike many ancient cities built by stacking quarried blocks, much of Paperikon was created by cutting directly into solid rock. Thousands of tons of stone were removed to form rooms, corridors, altars, and staircases, producing a multi-level complex that climbs up the natural contours of the mountain. Archaeologists have documented hundreds of carved steps, many of which maintain remarkably consistent dimensions despite the uneven terrain. Some of the chambers exhibit walls that appear surprisingly smooth and vertical, suggesting a level of control and planning that challenges assumptions about prehistoric stoneworking techniques in the region. The stone itself, primarily volcanic tuff and other hard rock formations typical of the Rhodope Mountains, is significantly more resistant to carving than softer materials like sandstone. This raises a critical question that researchers still struggle to answer. How did ancient builders achieve such large-scale stone shaping, using the limited tools believed to have been available during the Bronze Age? Metal tools existed, but their durability and hardness would have been far lower than modern steel implements. Experimental archaeology shows that shaping even a small cavity in similar rock using bronze chisels can take hours or even days of labor. Scaling that process to the immense size of Papericon implies an extraordinary investment of time, manpower, and technical organization. Some scholars propose that builders may have used thermal shock techniques, heating the rock with fire and then rapidly cooling it with water to cause cracking before chiseling away fragments. Others suggest that teams of workers using hammerstones and metal chisels gradually expanded the chambers over generations. Yet none of these explanations fully account for the apparent precision seen in certain areas of the site. Comparisons with other rock-cut monuments only deepen the mystery. For instance, the famous Nabatean city of Petra was carved largely into relatively soft sandstone cliffs, making it easier to sculpt elaborate facades. In contrast, the stone at Papericon is harder and less uniform, meaning that the same techniques would have required far greater effort. Similarly, the temples carved into volcanic rock at Ellora Caves demonstrate remarkable engineering skill, and yet those monuments date many centuries later and were created with more advanced iron tools. If the earliest phases of Papericon truly date back to the late Neolithic or early Bronze Age, the technological gap becomes even more striking. Archaeological investigations over the past 2 decades have uncovered further clues that complicate the story. Excavations have revealed layers of occupation from several historical periods, including Thracian, Roman, Byzantine, and medieval Bulgarian phases. Pottery fragments, coins, and inscriptions discovered throughout the site show that Papericon remained active for centuries as a strategic fortress and religious center. During Roman rule, the complex was expanded with additional structures and fortifications, while Byzantine engineers reinforced the defensive walls. Yet many of the core rock-cut features appear to predate these later modifications, suggesting that the original sacred complex was already ancient when later civilizations arrived. Radiocarbon dating of nearby habitation layers and artifacts supports the idea that ritual activity occurred here more than 3,000 years ago. One of the most intriguing discoveries concerns the elaborate system of channels carved into the stone near the central altar. These narrow grooves appear designed to guide liquids across the surface of the rock, possibly related to sacrificial rituals in which wine, oil, or animal blood flowed from the altar during ceremonies. The precision of these channels indicates deliberate engineering rather than random erosion. Yet the exact ritual function remains uncertain. Some researchers believe the flow of liquid may have been interpreted as a form of divination, with priests reading patterns or movements as signs from the gods. If this interpretation is correct, then the stone-cut infrastructure of Papericon served not only architectural purposes, but also complex ceremonial and symbolic roles. Modern laser scanning and geological surveys have begun to map the entire site in unprecedented detail, revealing that the carved features form a carefully organized layout aligned with the natural topography of the mountain. Staircases connect multiple terraces, leading from lower habitation areas up to the elevated sacred zone at the summit. This hierarchical arrangement suggests a deliberate architectural plan, perhaps reflecting the spiritual cosmology of the Thracian people. Yet even with modern technology, archaeologists still debate how such a plan could have been executed in an era lacking advanced surveying instruments. Maintaining consistent angles, levels, and pathways across a rugged rocky peak would have required remarkable spatial awareness and coordination. In the end, Papericon remains a monument that blurs the boundary between archaeology and mystery. It is simultaneously a religious sanctuary, a fortress, a city, and a colossal stone sculpture carved into the living mountain. The site testifies to the ingenuity of ancient builders who transformed raw geology into a sacred landscape that endured for millennia. Yet the deeper question remains unresolved. What combination of tools, knowledge, and organization allowed these early societies to reshape an entire mountaintop with such ambition and precision? Until new evidence emerges, the stone surfaces of Papericon continue to preserve silent traces of a technological tradition that modern researchers can observe but still struggle to fully understand. What do you think ancient builders actually used to carve an entire mountain like Papericon? Simple tools, lost technology, or something we still don't understand? Let me know your thoughts in the comments below. Within the Sonoran Desert of southern Arizona, about 80 kilometers south of modern-day Phoenix, stands the massive 4-story structure of Casa Grande ruins, a building that should not have survived. Rising from one of the harshest desert environments in North America, where summer temperatures regularly exceed 45 degrees Celsius and seasonal floods can erase entire settlements, the structure has endured for more than 700 years. No steel, no concrete, no wheeled transport, no draft animals. Just compacted desert soil engineered so effectively that parts of the building have outlasted many medieval stone structures from Europe. Even today, archaeologists still debate how the Hohokam civilization managed to construct and maintain such a technologically advanced settlement in the middle of an unforgiving desert landscape. The first documented European encounter with Casa Grande came in 1694, when Jesuit missionary Father Eusebio Kino traveled through the region and described a great house abandoned among the desert plains. Serious archaeological investigation did not begin until the late 19th century. In 1892, archaeologist Frank Hamilton Cushing conducted one of the earliest scientific studies of the site and discovered extensive irrigation canals surrounding the ruins. Later excavations throughout the 1900s revealed platform mounds, ball courts, residential compounds, shell jewelry from the Gulf of California, copper bells likely imported from Mesoamerica, and evidence of a massive regional canal network. Every excavation expanded the mystery. Casa Grande was not an isolated structure. It was part of an enormous, engineered desert civilization. One of the greatest mysteries surrounding Casa Grande is the material itself. The structure was built primarily from caliche, a hardened natural cement made from desert soil rich in calcium carbonate. Modern engineers know caliche is notoriously difficult to work with because it cracks under thermal stress and erodes rapidly under moisture exposure. Yet the walls of Casa Grande, some more than 1 meter thick, remained stable for centuries despite extreme temperature fluctuations between day and night. Researchers studying the internal composition found that the Hohokam did not simply pile mud together. The material appears carefully layered and compacted in stages, almost like primitive poured concrete. Some archaeologists estimate the Great House required thousands of tons of material moved and shaped entirely by human labor. The engineering challenge becomes even more astonishing when considering the environment. The Sonoran Desert experiences temperature swings capable of destroying weak earthen architecture within decades. Many adobe settlements from later centuries across the American Southwest deteriorated rapidly without constant repair. Casa Grande survived more than 7 centuries. In modern materials science, thermal mass construction is considered one of the most efficient passive cooling systems ever developed. Thick walls absorb heat during the day and slowly release it at night, stabilizing interior temperatures. Casa Grande appears to exploit this principle with remarkable sophistication long before thermodynamics existed as a scientific discipline. Some researchers argue that the Hohokam may have developed construction knowledge through centuries of experimentation, eventually creating one of the most durable adobe structures ever built in North America. Inside the structure, archaeologists discovered strategically placed windows and ventilation openings that continue to puzzle researchers. Some openings appear positioned specifically to channel airflow through the building during seasonal wind changes. Others align with solar positions during solstices and equinoxes. During certain times of year, sunlight passes through narrow openings and illuminates specific interior walls with surprising precision. This has led some researchers to propose that Casa Grande functioned partly as an astronomical observatory. Similar solar alignments are found in ancient structures such as Chaco Canyon and Machu Picchu, where architecture was linked directly to celestial cycles. What makes the Casa Grande alignments controversial is the level of accuracy involved. To calculate solar positions across multiple seasons without modern instruments would require decades of systematic observation. The Earth's axial tilt changes the sunrise position throughout the year, meaning even small construction errors could ruin the alignment. Some archaeologists argue the alignments may be coincidental because portions of the building have collapsed over time. Others counter that there are too many consistent alignments for chance alone to explain them. If intentional, the Hohokam possessed an advanced understanding of solar movement comparable to far larger ancient civilizations. Some researchers also believe these alignments may have served agricultural purposes. In a desert society dependent on irrigation, accurately tracking seasonal changes could determine planting schedules and water distribution cycles. If true, Casa Grande may have functioned as both a ceremonial and scientific structure simultaneously. But the most extraordinary achievement of the Hohokam civilization was not the great house itself, it was water. Casa Grande existed in a region where annual rainfall averages less than 30 centimeters. Agriculture on a large scale should have been nearly impossible. Yet excavations revealed one of the largest pre-industrial irrigation systems ever discovered in North America. The Hohokam constructed hundreds of kilometers of canals, some over 20 meters wide and several meters deep, stretching across the desert floor with astonishing precision. Modern hydraulic engineers studying these canals found something deeply surprising. The slope gradients were carefully controlled to maintain stable water flow. If the canals were too steep, erosion would destroy them. If too shallow, water would stagnate. Maintaining a functional gradient over tens of kilometers without laser surveying equipment or metal tools is extraordinarily difficult even by modern standards. Some canal segments deviated by only a few centimeters per kilometer. This level of precision suggests sophisticated surveying methods archaeologists still do not fully understand. Satellite imagery and aerial mapping later revealed that the canal system connected multiple Hohokam settlements into a vast agricultural network. Some researchers estimate the system irrigated tens of thousands of acres of farmland. Crops such as maize, beans, squash, and cotton supported a large regional population centuries before European arrival. The scale rivals irrigation achievements seen in ancient Mesopotamia and parts of the Nile Valley despite being developed independently in the deserts of North America. Archaeological discoveries also revealed evidence of long-distance trade. Marine shells from the Pacific coast, macaw feathers from Mesoamerica, and copper artifacts suggest the Hohokam participated in a trade network spanning hundreds or even thousands of kilometers. This challenges the outdated assumption that prehistoric North American societies were technologically isolated or primitive. Casa Grande may have been a major regional center connected to wider cultural systems across the southwest and northern Mexico. Some artifacts discovered near the site resemble objects found in Mesoamerican civilizations, leading researchers to debate whether cultural exchange influenced Hohokam engineering and astronomy. The discovery of bull courts near Hohokam settlements strengthened these theories. Similar structures were common in ancient Mesoamerican societies, where ritual ball games held political and religious significance. Although direct connections remain debated, the similarities suggest Casa Grande existed within a far more interconnected ancient world than previously believed. Yet perhaps the greatest mystery is how everything collapsed. Around the 15th century, the Hohokam settlements surrounding Casa Grande were abandoned. There is little evidence of catastrophic warfare. No mass graves, no burn destruction layers large enough to indicate sudden invasion. Climate studies using tree ring data suggest the region experienced prolonged droughts during the late medieval period, including mega droughts capable of devastating agricultural systems. But drought alone may not explain the near-total disappearance of such a sophisticated engineered society. Some researchers believe the irrigation network itself became too complex to maintain. Large canal systems require enormous labor coordination. Sediment buildup, flooding, or minor infrastructure failures can trigger cascading collapse across entire agricultural regions. Once the system destabilized, food production may have failed rapidly. Others suggest social fragmentation, resource exhaustion, or changing trade patterns weaken the civilization over generations. What do you think really caused the collapse of the Hohokam civilization climate disaster? The failure of their massive canal system, or something we still haven't discovered yet? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Beneath the desert sands of ancient Egypt lies a place that has long unsettled archaeologists, engineers, and historians alike. Hidden deep within the vast necropolis of Saqqara, not far from the ruins of the ancient capital Memphis, the underground complex known as the Serapeum of Saqqara represents one of the most puzzling feats of stone engineering from the ancient world. First brought to modern attention in 1850 by the French Egyptologist Auguste Mariette, the site initially appeared to be little more than a buried ceremonial passage. Yet as excavations continued, Mariette revealed something extraordinary. A vast subterranean network of tunnels stretching for nearly 3 kilometers, lined with massive chambers that house gigantic stone sarcophagi, carved from single blocks of granite and diorite. Yes, each box weighs between 70 and 100 tons, with the lids alone sometimes exceeding 30 tons. Even in an age of cranes and heavy machinery, moving such objects would be a considerable challenge. The fact that these structures were created and placed underground more than 3,000 years ago has raised questions that remain difficult to answer. According to the traditional interpretation, the Serapeum served as the burial place for the sacred Apis bulls associated with the ancient Egyptian deity Apis. These bulls were considered living manifestations of divine power and were mummified with elaborate rituals upon their death. However, the enormous stone containers discovered in the tunnels have puzzled researchers for decades. Each granite sarcophagus measures roughly 3.8 meters in length, more than 2 meters in height, and weighs far more than would be necessary to contain the remains of a single animal. Some of the sarcophagi discovered during early excavations were completely empty, while others contained only fragments of animal bones that appeared broken or disturbed. These inconsistencies have fueled debate about whether the structures served purely ritual purposes or whether they held additional functions that remain unknown. Yet beyond their purpose, It is the extraordinary precision of the stonework that has generated the greatest scientific curiosity. Granite is an extremely hard material, measuring approximately 6 to 7 on the Mohs hardness scale. Even modern stoneworkers require diamond-tipped tools and powerful machinery to cut and polish granite efficiently. Despite this, the surfaces of the Serapeum sarcophagi are remarkably smooth and geometrically precise. Many interior walls appear polished to a mirror-like finish, and the corners form near-perfect right angles. Engineers who have examined the boxes have noted that the flatness of certain surfaces deviates by only fractions of a millimeter across several meters. For comparison, achieving such tolerances in modern manufacturing often requires precision milling machines or industrial grinding tools. Among the most intriguing aspects of the Serapeum is the evidence suggesting sophisticated drilling and cutting techniques. During detailed studies of Egyptian stoneworking in the 19th century, the renowned archaeologist Flinders Petrie carefully examined drill holes and tool marks from multiple ancient sites, including Saqqara, and Petrie observed spiral grooves inside cylindrical holes drilled into hard stone such as granite and diorite. These grooves appeared remarkably regular, indicating a rotational drilling process rather than simple hammering or chiseling. Based on measurements of the groove's spacing, Petrie concluded that the cutting tools seemed to advance through granite at a rate that was surprisingly fast. Far faster than expected if the tools were made only of copper, the material traditionally attributed to ancient Egyptian drills. Experimental archaeology has attempted to reproduce these marks using copper tubes combined with abrasive sand, which is the conventional explanation proposed by Egyptologists. While such techniques can indeed drill into granite, the process is extremely slow and often produces irregular patterns. In contrast, some drill holes observed on ancient artifacts display extremely clean and uniform spiral traces. Petrie famously remarked that the precision suggested a degree of mechanical efficiency, not usually associated with tools made from soft metals. This observation does not necessarily imply lost advanced technology, but it does suggest that the ancient craftsmen may have employed drilling methods far more refined than previously assumed. The mystery deepens when one considers the scale of the Serapeum project. Granite blocks used for the sarcophagi were likely quarried in the region of Aswan, located more than 800 kilometers south of Saqqara along the Nile River. Transporting stones weighing up to 100 tons would have required enormous logistical coordination. Once the blocks reached Saqqara, they had to be carved with extreme precision and then lowered into narrow underground corridors where the chambers were located. Some passageways are only slightly wider than the sarcophagi themselves, leaving little margin for error during installation. Modern engineers examining the site often remark that placing such massive objects in confined subterranean spaces would be difficult even with contemporary equipment. Excavations throughout the 20th century continue to uncover additional details about the complex. Archaeological investigations during the 1960s and 1970s documented the architectural layout of the tunnels, revealing that the main gallery branches into several chambers arranged in a symmetrical pattern. Each chamber houses one of the monumental granite boxes. The tunnels themselves are carved directly into limestone bedrock, with ceilings and walls showing surprisingly straight lines and smooth surfaces. Although chisel marks are visible in some sections, other areas appear unusually uniform, suggesting that the excavation may have involved systematic and carefully planned methods. Researchers have compared the engineering of the Serapeum with other achievements of ancient Egypt, such as the precise stone joints found in the Great Pyramid of Giza. While the pyramids demonstrate remarkable architectural alignment and large-scale construction, the Serapeum reveals something different: the ability to shape enormous blocks of extremely hard stone with extraordinary accuracy. In many respects, the site resembles a gigantic underground gallery of precision-carved granite containers. Some scholars have even described it as one of the most technically impressive stoneworking achievements of the ancient world. Despite more than a century and a half of study, several questions remain unresolved. Exactly how the ancient craftsmen drilled, cut, and polished granite with such precision continues to be debated. No advanced drilling devices have been discovered in the archaeological record, and the surviving tools found in Egyptian workshops are primarily made from copper and stone. Yet the physical evidence preserved on the sarcophagi and other artifacts indicates that the techniques used were highly effective, whether through ingenious combinations of abrasives, carefully engineered drilling systems, or methods that have yet to be fully reconstructed. The builders of the Serapeum achieved results that still challenge modern understanding. What do you think? Were these incredible feats the result of lost advanced techniques, or simply human ingenuity pushed to its absolute limits? Share your thoughts in the comments below. A frozen lake in southern Siberia, near the border of Mongolia, hides one of the strangest ruins ever discovered, Porbazin. Built more than 1,200 years ago on an isolated island surrounded by mountains and permafrost, the structure looks less like a nomadic fortress and more like a lost Chinese imperial palace. It was engineered with astonishing precision, constructed in one of the harshest climates on Earth, and then seemingly abandoned almost immediately after completion. Even today, archaeologists still cannot fully explain why it was built, how such advanced construction was possible in that location, or why a massive project requiring enormous manpower left behind almost no evidence of long-term human occupation. Porbazin, meaning clay house in the Tuvan language, sits in Lake Terrakol at an elevation of roughly 1,300 meters above sea level. From above, the site resembles a perfectly organized military compound. The outer walls form a near-rectangular enclosure, measuring approximately 215 by 162 meters. That makes the complex comparable in size to several Roman frontier forts and larger than many medieval European castles. Yet, unlike typical Siberian fortifications, Porbazin was built using techniques strongly associated with Tang Dynasty China. The mystery begins with the sheer improbability of its location. Southern Tuva is one of the coldest inhabited regions in Asia. Winter temperatures regularly fall below -40 degrees Celsius. The lake surrounding the island freezes solid for long periods each year, and even modern access to the site is difficult. Transporting thousands of tons of timber, clay, and construction material to the island in the 8th century would have been an extraordinary logistical operation. Archaeologists believe the builders may have exploited frozen winter surfaces to drag heavy materials across the ice, similar to theories surrounding the transport of megaliths in other ancient civilizations. But even that explanation raises another question. Why commit such enormous resources to an island with almost no agricultural or strategic value? Radiocarbon dating and dendrochronological analysis eventually connected the structure to the Uyghur Khaganate, one of the most powerful nomadic empires of the 8th century. Research published after excavations in the 2007 expedition suggested construction occurred around the year 757 during the reign of Bayanshur Khan. This dating became even more precise after scientists analyzed wood preserved in the permafrost and identified a spike in radiocarbon caused by the Miyake event of 775 CE, a cosmic radiation event recorded in tree rings worldwide. Very few archaeological sites in the world have been dated with such unusual astronomical precision, but the dating only deepened the puzzle. The Uyghurs were traditionally a mobile horse-based civilization dominating vast steppes through cavalry warfare and trade routes. Porbazin, however, looks nothing like a nomadic encampment. Its layout follows principles remarkably similar to Tang imperial architecture. The central courtyard, axial symmetry, compartmentalized rooms, and gate orientation strongly resemble palace complexes. From Chang'an, the capital of Tang, China, located more than 2,000 kilometers away, this has led some historians to believe Chinese architects or engineers may have directly participated in the project. Historical records mention diplomatic marriages between Uyghur rulers and Tang princesses. One theory suggests Pourbaix could have been constructed for a royal bride familiar with Chinese court architecture. Another proposes it was intended as a Manichaean monastery after the Uyghurs adopted Manichaeism as a state religion in the 8th century. The architectural precision of the site is especially difficult to explain considering its environment. Pourbaix was constructed primarily using rammed earth technology, a method in which damp soil is compressed layer by layer inside wooden molds until it hardens into dense structural walls. The same principle was used in sections of the Great Wall of China, some of which still survive after more than 2,000 years. Rammed earth requires careful control of moisture, pressure, and composition. In freezing climates, the engineering challenge becomes even greater because water trapped inside the structure can expand during freeze-thaw cycles and gradually destroy the walls. Yet substantial portions of Pourbaix's outer walls survived for over 12 centuries despite being exposed to extreme Siberian winters. Some sections still stand several meters high. Geological studies suggest the builders may have reinforced foundations with timber frameworks underneath the compacted earth, distributing weight across unstable permafrost soils. Modern Arctic engineering often uses similar load distribution principles to prevent structures from sinking or cracking as frozen ground shifts seasonally. This raises an uncomfortable question for historians. How did 8th century builders possess enough environmental understanding to construct such a large complex in one of the harshest climates on Earth? Another mystery lies beneath the ruins themselves. Surveys using ground-penetrating radar and sediment analysis revealed that the island may once have been part of a different hydrological environment. Some researchers believe seismic activity altered the lake basin after construction. Southern Siberia is tectonically active, and evidence of ancient earthquakes has been found in nearby geological formations. Cracks discovered in portions of the foundation suggest the structure may have suffered damage shortly after completion. That possibility could explain why Pourbaix appears strangely empty. Unlike major ancient settlements, the site contains surprisingly few artifacts. Archaeologists expected to find large quantities of domestic waste, tools, weapons, animal bones, ceramics, or evidence of prolonged habitation. Instead, discoveries were remarkably sparse. A few roof tiles, burnt wooden beams, fragments of pottery, and traces of heating systems were uncovered, but nothing indicating a thriving long-term community. This absence is one of the most unsettling aspects of the entire site. A project requiring such immense labor should have left behind the archaeological footprint of hundreds, possibly thousands of workers and residents. Instead, Pourbaix feels almost abandoned from the beginning. Some experts believe the structure may never have been fully occupied at all. There is evidence of a major fire inside the complex. Burn patterns indicate that wooden structures collapsed inward, possibly during a catastrophic event. If an earthquake struck shortly after construction, the combination of structural instability and fire may have forced the site's abandonment within only a few years. In that scenario, Pourbaix would represent one of history's largest failed megaprojects, a massive imperial experiment destroyed almost immediately after completion. But there are even stranger theories. Because of its geometric layout and isolated setting, some researchers proposed astronomical or ceremonial functions. The orientation of the main gate and internal divisions align closely with solar movement patterns during certain seasons. Although the evidence is not as strong as at sites like Stonehenge or Chaco Canyon,
the possibility of ritual alignment remains debated. Others argue the fortress may have symbolized political authority rather than serving any practical military purpose, functioning more as an ideological monument visible across the lake. The comparison with other ancient mysteries becomes unavoidable. Like Machu Picchu, Poblacion was built in a geographically extreme environment requiring sophisticated logistics. Like the desert fortresses of the Silk Road, it demonstrates cultural fusion across enormous distances. And like Nan Madol in Micronesia, it sits isolated within water in a location that appears irrational for large-scale construction. Yet Poblacion differs from all of them in one critical way. It emerged from a nomadic empire not usually associated with monumental architecture on this scale. That contradiction may be the site's greatest mystery of all. So what do you think Poblacion really was? A lost palace, a sacred complex, or an ancient mega-project that failed almost immediately after it was built? Let us know your theory in the comments below. On the southwestern coast of modern-day Turkey, in the ancient city of Halikarnassus, a structure once rose nearly 50 meters into the sky, taller than most surviving buildings of the ancient Mediterranean world. For more than 16 centuries, it resisted earthquakes, salt air, war, and erosion. Even after collapsing, fragments of its engineering continued to puzzle archaeologists, metallurgists, and structural engineers. The mausoleum at Halikarnassus was not merely a royal tomb. It was a technological statement so advanced that many of its construction methods are still debated today. Built around 350 BCE for Mausolus, the Persian satrap of Caria, the monument became so influential that the word mausoleum itself entered the vocabulary of nearly every modern language. Ancient writers such as Pliny the Elder described it as one of the 7 wonders of the ancient world. But what truly makes Halikarnassus extraordinary is not its fame. It is the growing evidence that its builders possessed engineering knowledge far beyond what historians once believed possible for the 4th century BCE. The ruins are located in present-day Bodrum, Turkey, directly above an active seismic zone near the boundary of the Anatolian and Aegean tectonic plates. Modern geological surveys show that this region has experienced repeated destructive earthquakes for over 2,000 years. Yet the mausoleum remained standing from approximately 350 BCE until at least the 12th or 13th century CE. That means the structure survived for more than 1,500 years in one of the most earthquake-prone coastal regions of the Eastern Mediterranean. The rediscovery of the site began in the 19th century when British archaeologist Charles Thomas Newton conducted excavations between 1856 and 1858. Using descriptions from ancient texts and measurements recorded by classical historians, Newton located buried foundations beneath the Ottoman-era town. Excavations uncovered enormous marble blocks, sculptural fragments, sections of stairways, column drums, and most importantly, evidence of sophisticated metal reinforcement systems hidden inside the stonework. At first, researchers assumed the metal clamps and connectors were relatively simple structural supports, but closer examination revealed something far stranger. One of the greatest mysteries surrounding Halikarnassus is the advanced system of metallic stone-locking technology used throughout the monument. Archaeologists discovered that massive marble blocks were not merely stacked under gravity. Many were connected through carefully carved dovetail sockets, filled with metal clamps made from iron, bronze, and lead composites. This alone was impressive. But the real mystery emerged when metallurgists analysed corrosion patterns. Normally, iron exposed to humid Mediterranean air deteriorates rapidly through oxidation. In coastal regions with high salt concentrations, corrosion accelerates dramatically.
Modern untreated iron can weaken within decades under similar environmental conditions. Yet some metal connectors from Halicarnassus survived in recognizable form after more than 2 millennia underground. Researchers found evidence suggesting the builders intentionally isolated iron components inside layers of molten lead. The lead acted as a flexible, shock-absorbing barrier while also reducing galvanic corrosion. In modern engineering, similar principles are used in anti-corrosion systems for bridges, ships, and reinforced concrete structures. The precision of the sockets was equally astonishing. Some clamp channels showed tolerances of only a few millimeters. Considering the monument was built without modern surveying lasers, powered cutting equipment, or industrial drilling systems, the level of alignment appears almost impossible. Certain researchers have compared the locking system to techniques used in later Roman earthquake-resistant construction, particularly in structures from Asia Minor and parts of Byzantium. Yet Halicarnassus predates many of those examples by centuries. Even more mysterious is the possibility that the metal locking system also functioned as seismic stabilization technology. Structural engineers studying earthquake-resistant architecture have proposed that the combination of lead, iron clamps, and slightly flexible stone joints may have allowed the building to absorb and redistribute seismic energy instead of fracturing catastrophically. In effect, the structure may have behaved like an ancient form of base-isolated architecture. This theory gained attention because similar concepts exist in much later engineering history. Modern earthquake-resistant skyscrapers often rely on dampers, flexible joints, and energy dissipation systems to survive seismic shock waves. The idea that builders in 350 BCE may have discovered primitive versions of these principles is deeply controversial, but the engineering mysteries do not stop there. The mausoleum stood approximately 45 to 50 meters tall, equivalent to a modern 15-story building. Its upper levels included a stepped pyramid roof supporting a marble quadriga, a 4-horse chariot sculpture weighing several tons. Transporting such massive loads upward without steam engines, cranes, or hydraulic systems remains one of the greatest unanswered questions. Some historians propose enormous earth ramps surrounding the monument during construction. Others suggest compound pulley systems similar to devices later described by Archimedes. Yet none of these theories fully explain the placement precision visible in surviving architectural fragments. Several marble blocks weighing multiple tons show extremely tight-fitting surfaces with minimal gaps. In some areas, the joints are so precise that even thin blades cannot easily slide between the stones. Comparable precision appears in polygonal masonry at sites such as Sacsayhuaman and the granite chambers of Great Pyramid of Giza, though Halicarnassus used marble rather than harder igneous stone. Marble itself creates additional problems. Unlike limestone, marble can fracture unpredictably under stress during extraction and lifting. The larger the block, the greater the risk of catastrophic cracking. Yet the builders managed to construct enormous columns, sculptural friezes, and roof systems without widespread structural failure. Ancient sources credit the monument's sculptural program to several of the greatest artists of the Greek world, including Scopas, Bryaxis, Leochares, and Timotheus. The carvings displayed anatomical realism and dynamic motion centuries ahead of many earlier Mediterranean traditions. Some relief fragments show detailing so sharp that modern archaeologists initially believed portions had been recut during later restoration periods. Microscopic analysis of carving marks suggests the use of advanced iron chisels hardened through controlled heat treatment. If true, this indicates metallurgical sophistication beyond what is commonly associated with standard Greek tool-making of the era. The monument also represented an unprecedented fusion of architectural traditions. Its stepped pyramid roof resembled Egyptian funerary structures. The surrounding Ionic colonnades reflected Greek design. The elevated podium echoed Anatolian royal architecture. Persian influences appeared in decorative symbolism and monumental proportions. Instead of collapsing into stylistic chaos, the structure achieved remarkable visual harmony. Modern architects often struggle when combining radically different engineering traditions into a single stable structure. Different column systems, load distributions, and material behaviors can create dangerous stress imbalances. Yet Halicarnassus appears to have integrated these systems successfully over a building lifespan exceeding 15 centuries. Another unresolved issue involves the foundation itself. Geological studies indicate that parts of ancient Halicarnassus were built above layered sediments vulnerable to shifting and subsidence. Large stone structures on unstable coastal terrain typically develop severe cracking over time. But excavation reports suggest the mausoleum's base distributed weight unusually effectively. Some researchers speculate that layered rubble foundations beneath the structure acted as primitive seismic cushions, dispersing force through multiple compression zones. Similar methods appear in certain ancient Japanese and Incan constructions designed for earthquake resilience. The collapse of the mausoleum remains a mystery. There is no evidence that the structure was destroyed in a single earthquake. Instead, it gradually deteriorated over centuries from repeated seismic activity. By the 15th century, many sections were still standing before the Knights of St. John dismantled parts of the ruins to build Bodrum Castle. What makes this even more remarkable is that some of the most important evidence of Halicarnassus's engineering was discovered inside reused stones in medieval walls, where archaeologists found hidden metal locking systems embedded within the structure. What do you think was the greatest lost technology behind the mausoleum at Halicarnassus? Was it advanced engineering knowledge, or something history still cannot fully explain? Share your thoughts in the comments below.
In the far north of South Africa, near the borders of Zimbabwe and Botswana, a sandstone hill rises above the dry Limpopo Valley. On its summit once stood Mapungubwe, a forgotten African kingdom that mastered gold with astonishing precision nearly 800 years ago. Long before European ships reached southern Africa, this civilization was already connected to global trade routes stretching from China to the Middle East. But the deeper archaeologists looked, the stranger Mapungubwe became. The site was officially rediscovered in 1932 by local farmer and explorer Van Graan, after stories of a hidden hill filled with ancient treasures circulated through the region. Archaeologist Leo Fouché later led the first formal excavations. What they uncovered would permanently change African archaeology. At first glance, Mapungubwe does not resemble famous ancient capitals like Machu Picchu or Petra. There are no gigantic temples or colossal statues. Yet beneath its relatively modest ruins was evidence of something many historians once believed impossible in southern Africa during the 13th century. A highly stratified kingdom with advanced metallurgy, international trade, centralized political authority, and engineering knowledge sophisticated enough to sustain thousands of people in an unforgiving environment. The first major mystery is the hill itself. Mapungubwe Hill rises roughly 30 meters above the surrounding plain, with steep natural sandstone cliffs acting almost like defensive walls. Archaeologists discovered that the ruling elite lived on the summit while commoners lived below, one of the earliest clear examples of class-based spatial separation in sub-Saharan Africa. That alone was historically shocking, but the logistics behind it are even more difficult to explain. The Limpopo Valley is semi-arid. Summer temperatures often exceed 35 degrees Celsius, and rainfall is unpredictable. Maintaining a permanent elite settlement on top of a rocky hill would have required organized food storage, controlled access to water, labor coordination, and political stability.
Estimates suggest the wider Mapungubwe population may have reached between 5,000 and 10,000 people during its peak around AD 1220-1290. Supporting a population of that scale in such an environment would have been an immense engineering challenge. Yet archaeologists still have not found infrastructure proportional to the kingdom's apparent complexity. There is no massive reservoir system comparable to Roman cisterns, no extensive irrigation canals like those of Mesopotamia, no monumental hydraulic network like the Maya. The kingdom clearly functioned, but many of the systems that sustained it remain archaeologically invisible. And then there is the gold. The most famous artifact from Mapungubwe is the golden rhinoceros of Mapungubwe, a small ceremonial sculpture created around the 13th century. At first glance, it appears simple, but under closer examination, it becomes one of the most technically unsettling artifacts ever discovered in southern African archaeology. The rhinoceros was constructed using extremely thin sheets of hammered gold wrapped around a carved wooden core. To create it, artisans had to understand mining, smelting, hammering, shaping, cutting, and joining delicate metallic surfaces without tearing them apart. Even modern metalworkers acknowledge how difficult it is to consistently produce ultra-thin gold foil without advanced temperature control and highly refined techniques. Some of the gold sheets recovered at Mapungubwe are thinner than 1 millimeter. Producing material at that level requires remarkable control over force distribution during hammering. Too much pressure fractures the metal. Too little accomplishes nothing. Ancient craftsmen somehow mastered the balance. The deeper mystery is that the archaeological evidence for the industrial process behind this craftsmanship is surprisingly limited. Researchers have discovered furnaces, crucibles, slag, ironworking debris, and traces of metallurgical activity across the region. But the scale of surviving infrastructure does not seem to match the sophistication of the finished gold objects. Unlike ancient Egypt, where massive mining and smelting operations left behind extensive industrial scars, Mapungubwe's metallurgical footprint appears comparatively subtle. That creates a difficult question. How did a kingdom with relatively limited visible industrial infrastructure achieve such precision in gold production? Some researchers believe Mapungubwe's metallurgists may have used highly specialized small-scale furnaces capable of reaching temperatures above 1,000 degrees Celsius. Experimental archaeology has shown that charcoal-fired furnaces using forced air bellows can theoretically achieve these temperatures, but maintaining stable heat long enough to refine gold efficiently requires deep practical knowledge of airflow, fuel density, ore composition, and thermal behavior. This becomes even more impressive when compared to contemporary Europe. In many rural parts of 13th century Europe, goldsmithing was still concentrated among small elite workshops with limited precision tools. Yet, artisans in Mapungubwe were producing ceremonial gold objects with astonishing symmetry and delicate structural control in a region once incorrectly assumed to be technologically isolated. The gold itself also raises unresolved questions. Large quantities of gold artifacts have been recovered from elite burials, including bracelets, beads, scepters, and animal sculptures. This suggests access to a major supply network, yet no nearby gold source alone fully explains the kingdom's apparent wealth. Some archaeologists suspect Mapungubwe controlled trade corridors linking inland goldfields with the Swahili coast, turning the kingdom into a strategic redistribution center for precious metals moving toward Indian Ocean markets. And this leads directly into another mystery: global trade. Excavations at Mapungubwe uncovered glass beads from Persia, Chinese celadon pottery from the Song dynasty, imported ceramics, and other luxury goods originating thousands of kilometers away. These were not isolated curiosities. They were part of a functioning international exchange system. For imported Chinese ceramics to reach Mapungubwe in the 13th century, goods would have needed to travel across the Indian Ocean to East African trading ports, then move inland through a vast network of merchants, caravans, political alliances, and controlled trade routes. That implies organizational sophistication on a scale historians once denied existed in southern Africa before colonial contact. Mapungubwe was not isolated. It was connected to the medieval world economy. Its elites likely accumulated power by controlling cattle, ivory, gold, and long-distance commerce. Cattle were especially important. In many African societies, cattle represented wealth, status, and political authority. Archaeological evidence suggests Mapungubwe's rulers managed enormous herds despite environmental limitations. Maintaining such herds in a drought-prone region would have required advanced seasonal planning and territorial control. Then, almost suddenly, the kingdom disappeared. By around AD 1300, Mapungubwe was abandoned. There is no evidence of catastrophic warfare on the scale seen at sites destroyed by invasion, no signs of massive fire destruction, no confirmed epidemic. Instead, the kingdom appears to have declined quietly. Climate change is one major theory. Paleoclimate studies indicate southern Africa experienced increasing aridity during the late 13th century. Reduced rainfall could have destabilized agriculture and weakened cattle-based wealth systems. Another theory suggests trade routes gradually shifted northward toward the emerging power of Great Zimbabwe, which later became the dominant political center in the region. But neither explanation fully resolves the mystery. Civilizations usually leave transitional phases behind evidence of migration, adaptation, or gradual restructuring. Mapungubwe instead seems to fade with unusual silence. A kingdom sophisticated enough to produce advanced gold artifacts and participate in intercontinental trade somehow vanished while leaving behind surprisingly little explanation for how it truly functioned. What do you think was the true source of Mapungubwe's advanced gold technology, lost engineering knowledge, hidden trade networks, or something historians still haven't fully uncovered? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Steep cliffs and dry stone valleys of the Zagros Mountains in northern Iraq surround Rabbana Merkuli, a massive ancient fortress city that many archaeologists believe belonged to the Parthian Empire more than 2,000 years ago. What makes this place terrifyingly mysterious is not simply its size, but its impossible location. Entire defensive walls stretch across mountain ridges more than 1,000 meters above sea level. Massive stone structures cling to slopes so steep that even modern engineers would struggle to transport materials there without heavy machinery. Yet somehow ancient builders created a fortified city capable of housing soldiers, storing water, controlling trade routes, and surviving in one of the harshest terrains in the Middle East. For centuries, almost nobody knew the true scale of Rabbana Merkuli. From the ground, the ruins blended into the mountains themselves. But once drones, satellite imagery, and aerial surveys were used in the 21st century, archaeologists realized the site was far larger and more sophisticated than previously believed. Suddenly, what appeared to be scattered ruins became evidence of one of the most strategically engineered mountain fortresses of the ancient world. The first modern observations of the site were made during surveys in Iraqi Kurdistan in the late 20th century, but the terrain made systematic excavation extremely difficult. Early explorers only identified scattered stone walls and isolated ruins. At first, researchers believed the site was merely a small military outpost. Later expeditions revealed something much larger. Archaeologists discovered defensive walls stretching nearly 4 kilometers across mountain slopes. This changed the interpretation completely. Rabanna Mersley was no minor outpost. It was a fortified city controlling a major corridor through the Zagros Mountains. As excavations continued, researchers uncovered stair systems carved directly into bedrock, watchtowers positioned at strategic choke points, and enormous gateways designed to restrict enemy movement. Drone mapping later showed that the fortress used the natural mountain itself as part of its defense network, reducing the need for artificial walls while maximizing visibility across surrounding valleys. One of the most shocking discoveries came when researchers identified giant rock reliefs near the entrance. These carvings, likely depicting a Parthian ruler, suggested the site may have held political or ceremonial importance in addition to military value. The reliefs also proved the fortress was likely connected directly to elite Parthian authority rather than local tribal occupation. Further studies identified evidence of water management systems, reservoirs, and channels carved into rock. This discovery raised one of the greatest mysteries surrounding Rabanna Merkeli. How did an ancient civilization maintain a large population on a dry mountain fortress with limited natural water access? The walls of Rabanna Merkeli are among the most puzzling aspects of the site. Many sections were built directly along unstable slopes and rocky ridges. Some surviving walls still stand several meters high despite more than 2 millennia of erosion, earthquakes, and weather exposure. Modern geological analysis suggests the builders intentionally selected stable bedrock zones to anchor the walls. In several areas, the stone blocks appear fitted to irregular mountain surfaces with surprising precision. Unlike the perfectly cut polygonal stones seen at Sacsayhuaman, Rabanna Merkeli relied on a hybrid system combining natural cliff formations with reinforced masonry. This allowed the fortress to absorb stress from shifting terrain more effectively than rigid wall systems. Some archaeologists compare the engineering logic to later medieval mountain fortresses, yet Rabanna Merkeli predates many of them by centuries. Even more mysterious is the logistics problem. Transporting stone, tools, timber, and supplies up steep mountain paths would have required an enormous workforce and highly organized planning. There is still no consensus on how the Parthians managed construction on such terrain without advanced lifting technology. Perhaps the greatest technical mystery is water. Rabanna Merkeli sits in a region where summer temperatures can exceed 40 degrees Celsius, while rainfall remains highly seasonal. A fortress city housing hundreds or possibly thousands of people would have required enormous water reserves. Excavations revealed reservoirs and channels integrated directly into the mountain landscape. Researchers believe rainwater collection played a major role, but the scale of the system suggests more advanced hydraulic planning. Some channels appear angled with precise gradients, allowing water to move through gravity-fed systems similar to those used by the Nabateans at Petra. Hydrologists studying the region estimate that maintaining a population of even 1,000 people would require tens of thousands of litres of water per day when accounting for drinking, food preparation and animals. The existence of such infrastructure suggests the builders understood long-term water storage, seasonal flow patterns, and possibly even methods for minimizing evaporation. What remains unexplained is how these systems were maintained on steep mountain terrain for extended periods. Some channels were cut directly into rock surfaces at elevations difficult to access even today. Near the entrance to the fortress stand enormous rock carvings etched into vertical cliff faces. These reliefs are believed to depict a ruler wearing Parthian royal attire. Their presence raises several mysteries simultaneously. First, why place ceremonial carvings in such a difficult location? Second, how were they created? The cliff faces are steep and dangerous. Creating large-scale carvings there would have required scaffolding systems, rope access, or suspended platforms. yet almost no physical evidence of such construction methods survives. The precision of the carvings is also remarkable. Despite weathering, researchers can still identify folds in clothing, facial proportions, and symbolic royal elements. This suggests highly trained artisans working under controlled conditions in an environment where even standing safely would have been difficult. Some historians believe the relief served as psychological warfare. Anyone approaching the fortress would immediately encounter gigantic royal imagery carved into the mountain itself, reinforcing the authority of the Parthian state before invaders even reached the gates. Rabbana Merkli may not have been purely military. The fortress overlooks critical routes through the Zagros Mountains connecting Mesopotamia to the Iranian plateau. These mountain corridors were essential for trade, troop movement, and political communication across the Parthian Empire. Archaeologists believe the site may have functioned as a strategic checkpoint controlling caravans moving through the mountains. If true, Rabbana Merkli was part fortress, part administrative centre, and part logistical hub. This theory is supported by the scale of the site. The fortress covers roughly 40 hectares, far larger than many isolated military outposts. Some researchers estimate that maintaining such a complex would have required organised taxation, food distribution, and permanent administrative personnel. In this sense, Rabbana Merkli resembles ancient mountain control centres such as Masada, though its engineering approach appears even more integrated with the surrounding terrain. One of the strangest mysteries is historical silence. Despite its massive scale and strategic importance, Rabbana Merkli is barely mentioned in surviving ancient texts. No detailed historical records describe its construction, destruction, or abandonment. This absence has led to multiple theories. Some believe the fortress was abandoned gradually as trade routes shifted and Parthian power declined. Others suggest conflict with the Roman Empire may have destabilized the region. Another possibility is that the fortress simply became too expensive to maintain once centralized authority weakened. But the lack of written documentation remains deeply unusual. A fortress city with walls stretching across mountainsides should have appeared prominently in regional records. Instead, Rabbana Merkli vanished into the landscape for centuries. What do you think was the greatest mystery of Rabbana Merkli? The impossible mountain construction, the hidden water system, or the fortress disappearing from history almost completely? Share your thoughts and theories in the comments below. Stretching across the brutal hills of northern Britain, the ancient Roman frontier known as Mile Castle still hides engineering mysteries that modern archaeologists struggle to fully explain. Built nearly 2,000 years ago along Hadrian's Wall, these small stone forts were positioned with astonishing precision across more than 117 kilometres of uneven terrain. No satellites, no lasers, no engines. Yet the system functioned with a level of coordination that resembles military infrastructure from far later civilizations. The remains of the Mile castles became clearer during large-scale surveys in the 18th and 19th centuries, when antiquarians and military engineers began mapping Hadrian's Wall in detail. Excavations revealed that the structures were not random guard posts, but part of a mathematically organized defensive network. Later digs uncovered drainage systems, standardized barracks, signal points, workshops, animal pens, and roads integrated directly into the wall itself. Early excavations mainly exposed collapsed stone walls and gateways. Later discoveries revealed underground drainage channels designed to survive northern Britain's wet climate. 20th century excavations uncovered evidence of rapid rebuilding phases, suggesting the wall was continuously modified over centuries. Modern LIDAR scanning and aerial imaging later revealed how carefully the Mile castles were aligned with visibility corridors across hills and valleys. Some excavations even uncovered traces of repaired stonework, showing that Roman engineers maintained the system with long-term strategic planning rather than temporary military occupation. One of the greatest mysteries surrounding the Mile castles is the precision of their placement. Most were built almost exactly 1 Roman mile apart, roughly 1.48 kilometers, across landscapes filled with cliffs, marshes, rocky ridges and steep valleys. Modern surveying teams using GPS have noted how difficult it would be to maintain such consistency even today under similar terrain conditions. The Romans used tools like the groma for straight-line alignment and the corobes for levelling ground. But those instruments alone do not fully explain how engineers maintained near-uniform spacing across more than 117 kilometers. A small directional error at the beginning could have created massive deviations later, yet many sections remain astonishingly accurate. Researchers comparing Hadrian's Wall with other ancient fortification systems discovered something unusual. Roman alignment accuracy on some sections rivals later medieval military projects built more than 1,000 years afterward. Some stretches deviate only slightly despite terrain that should have forced major inconsistencies. Northern Britain experiences heavy rainfall, freezing winters, and repeated freeze-thaw cycles that normally destroy ancient masonry over time. Yet parts of several Mile castle foundations remain stable after nearly 2 millennia. Excavations revealed that Roman engineers layered crushed stone, compacted gravel, and drainage channels beneath foundations to reduce water pressure buildup. In some locations, the construction method changes depending on local geology, suggesting Roman engineers adjusted designs according to soil conditions rather than using one universal blueprint. This is particularly surprising because geotechnical engineering as a formal science would not emerge until many centuries later. Some modern civil engineers studying the wall argue that the Romans possessed a highly practical understanding of load distribution, erosion control and drainage behaviour acquired through military construction experience across the empire. Comparisons with medieval castles in Britain show that many later fortifications actually suffered worse structural degradation despite being built more than 1,000 years later. This raises ongoing debates about whether Roman construction standards in frontier regions were far more advanced than traditionally believed. Another unresolved mystery is how efficiently the Mile castles functioned as a communication network. Between the larger forts stood smaller watchtowers called turrets, positioned close enough for rapid visual signalling. Modern terrain simulations demonstrate that many of these locations maintain direct lines of sight through narrow valleys and over hill ridges with remarkable precision. Some archaeologists believe the wall operated like a giant ancient warning system, capable of transmitting alerts across huge distances in minutes, using smoke, fire or reflected light. What makes this extraordinary is the level of geographic planning involved. Roman engineers appear to understand not only visibility but also atmospheric conditions, elevation advantages and long-distance signal reliability. Several placements seem intentionally optimized for communication efficiency rather than simple defensive convenience. Military historians have compared the system to later beacon chain networks used in medieval China and even early modern Europe, yet Hadrian's Wall predates many of those systems by centuries. Perhaps the most shocking aspect of the Mile castles is the speed of construction. Historians estimate that Hadrian's Wall and its associated defences were built largely within less than a decade during the reign of Hadrian in the 2nd century AD, that required quarrying, transporting, shaping and assembling millions of stones without mechanised cranes, engines or industrial machinery. Some stone blocks fit together with surprising precision, suggesting highly organised stone cutting operations and standardised measurement systems. Archaeological studies indicate that different Roman legions constructed different sectors of the wall, yet the final structure still maintained remarkable consistency. This level of coordination resembles modern industrial logistics more than traditional ancient construction. Some modern estimates suggest thousands of labourers, soldiers, engineers, blacksmiths, surveyors and transport workers would have needed to operate simultaneously under centralised planning. Maintaining food supplies, tools, stone deliveries and construction schedules across hostile frontier territory would itself have been an immense logistical achievement. Excavations reveal that mile castles were not completely identical. Archaeologists identified long-axis and short-axis designs, depending on the orientation of internal structures. This suggests different Roman legions followed slightly different engineering traditions while constructing separate sections. What remains mysterious is how the overall network still functioned so uniformly despite these variations. Roads connected smoothly, defensive spacing remained consistent, signal visibility was maintained, structural integration stayed efficient across the entire frontier. This combination of flexibility and standardization resembles modern modular military infrastructure. Instead of rigid duplication, Roman engineers may have used adaptable templates, capable of adjusting to terrain while preserving overall system performance. The mile castles were not static structures abandoned after construction. Excavations show repeated repairs, reinforcements, and redesigns over centuries. Some gates were narrowed, walls thickened, and internal layouts modified during changing military conditions. Archaeologists also discovered evidence that certain mile castles were later reused for storage, trade monitoring, or temporary civilian occupation after military priorities shifted. This adaptability suggests Hadrian's Wall functioned less like a simple barrier and more like a dynamic frontier management system. Some historians compare it to a living military organism constantly evolving in response to political threats, migration pressures, and environmental changes. Do you think the greatest Roman technology was not their weapons or buildings, but their ability to organize thousands of people into a system so advanced it still survives today? Share your thoughts in the comments below. High above the dry savanna landscapes of central Tanzania lies one of Africa's most enigmatic archaeological treasures, the Kondoa rock art sites. Scattered across the rocky hills of the Kondoa-Irangi region, this vast complex contains more than 200 decorated rock shelters, some hidden deep within sandstone cliffs, and others overlooking valleys that have changed little since prehistoric times. At first glance, these paintings appear simple: figures of hunters, animals, ritual dancers, and geometric symbols painted in shades of red and white. Yet behind their apparent simplicity lies a technological mystery that has puzzled archaeologists, chemists, and historians for decades. How did prehistoric people create pigments capable of surviving on exposed rock surfaces for thousands of years? Archaeological research suggests that the earliest paintings in Kondoa may date back as far as 10,000 years, produced by hunter-gatherer communities who once inhabited the region, long before pastoral societies arrived. Later layers of art, sometimes painted directly over earlier images, indicate that the shelters continued to be used for ritual or symbolic purposes for millennia. Excavations conducted throughout the 20th century, particularly during surveys in the 1950s and 1960s, revealed stone tools, hearth remains, and fragments of ochre pigment scattered across habitation floors beneath the painted walls. These discoveries confirm that the shelters were not merely galleries but active living spaces where people gathered, prepared materials, and likely performed ceremonies connected to the imagery above them. Among all the mysteries surrounding Kondoa, The most astonishing is the extraordinary durability of its pigments. The majority of the paintings were created using red ochre, a naturally occurring iron oxide mineral widely used by prehistoric cultures around the world. In theory, ochre alone should not survive for such immense periods when exposed to rain, sunlight, and temperature fluctuations. Yet many Kondoa paintings remain strikingly visible today, their red tones still vivid against pale sandstone surfaces even after thousands of years of environmental exposure. For comparison, many modern paints applied to outdoor stone structures begin fading within only a few decades, or even some industrial pigments designed for architectural durability rarely remain intact for more than a few centuries without restoration. The survival of Kondoa's prehistoric pigments therefore raises a compelling technological question. What formula allowed ancient artists to produce such long-lasting colour? Scientific investigations have attempted to answer this question by analysing microscopic samples from the paintings. Studies carried out during conservation programs in the late 20th century found that the pigments contained finely ground hematite particles, the iron-rich mineral responsible for the deep red colour of ochre. However, mineral pigment alone cannot explain the remarkable adhesion observed in Kondoa paintings, or in many locations the colour does not simply sit on the rock surface, but appears to have penetrated slightly into the sandstone itself, forming a thin but resilient layer that resists erosion. This suggests that prehistoric artists likely mixed the mineral powder with organic binders capable of strengthening the pigment and helping it bond with the rock. Researchers have proposed several possible binding agents, including animal fat, plant resin, egg proteins, or blood. Similar organic mixtures have been documented in prehistoric art elsewhere, such as the famous cave paintings of Lascaux in France or Altamira in Spain. However, Kondoa presents a unique challenge for scientists. After thousands of years in a tropical climate, most organic compounds would have degraded completely, leaving only faint chemical traces that are difficult to identify. As a result, no definitive recipe has been confirmed. The exact mixture used by Kondoa's ancient artist remains unknown, making it one of the most intriguing technological puzzles in prehistoric art. Another factor contributing to the preservation of these paintings may be the geological properties of the rock shelters themselves. Many of the artworks were created beneath natural overhangs that protect them from direct rainfall. The sandstone surfaces also possess a slightly porous texture, which may have allowed pigments mixed with liquid binders to seep into microscopic cavities before hardening. Over time, mineralization processes could have further stabilized the pigment layer, effectively sealing the color into the stone. Even with these protective factors, however, the longevity of the images still exceeds what scientists typically expect from prehistoric materials. The paintings themselves provide additional insight into the societies that created them. Many scenes depict hunters pursuing animals such as antelope, giraffes, or elephants, suggesting that the earliest artists were part of mobile hunting groups who relied on wildlife for survival. Other panels show rows of human figures dancing or holding hands, possibly representing communal rituals or spiritual ceremonies. Particularly fascinating are abstract geometric patterns, circles, grids, and intersecting lines that appear repeatedly across multiple shelters. These motifs may have held symbolic meaning, perhaps connected to cosmology, territory, or memory systems used by early communities. Archaeological evidence indicates that the Kondoa shelters were used by several cultural groups over time. The earliest paintings are often attributed to ancient hunter-gatherers, related to the ancestors of modern San peoples of southern Africa. Later artwork may have been produced by pastoral communities who migrated into the region several thousand years ago. Even today, the local Sandawe people maintain oral traditions that link some of the paintings to ritual practices involving trance dances and spiritual communication. While these traditions cannot directly explain the oldest images, they suggest a long continuity between ancient symbolic art and living cultural heritage. The scale of the Kondoa rock art landscape further adds to its mystery. Spread across a region covering hundreds of square kilometres, the painted shelters form an immense open-air archive of human creativity spanning many millennia. In 2006, the site was officially recognised as a UNESCO World Heritage Site due to its exceptional cultural significance. Conservation efforts now focus on protecting the fragile artworks from weathering, vandalism, and modern environmental pressures. Yet despite decades of research, one question continues to fascinate scientists and historians alike. How did prehistoric artists, working with stone tools and natural minerals, manage to create pigments that have endured for thousands of years? In the silent shelters of Kondoa rock art sites, the secret remains hidden within ancient pigments. The red figures of hunters and dancers still survive after thousands of years, preserved by a technique that science has not fully understood. Whether through organic binders, mineral chemistry, or unique environmental conditions, the artist of Kondoa created images that have outlived the civilizations that made them. What do you think allowed the paintings at Kondoa to survive for thousands of years? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Rising from the small Mediterranean island of Malta, the megalithic temples of Tarxian remain one of the most astonishing prehistoric engineering achievements ever discovered. Located near modern-day Valletta, the complex was first uncovered in the year 1914, when local farmers accidentally exposed massive stone blocks while ploughing their fields. Archaeological excavations soon followed under the direction of Maltese archaeologist Themistocles Zammit, revealing an elaborate ceremonial site constructed between roughly 3,600 and 2,500 BCE. This means the Tarxian complex is older than the Great Pyramid of Giza by nearly 1,000 years, placing it among the earliest monumental stone structures on Earth. The temples belong to a unique tradition of megalithic architecture found across Malta, including sites such as Hagar Kim and Najdra. Yet Tarxian stands out for its extraordinary complexity, rich decoration, and above all the perplexing engineering required to move and position enormous limestone blocks long before the invention of metal tools or wheeled transport. At the heart of the mystery lies a simple but staggering question. How were the enormous stones of Tarxian moved into place? Many of the megaliths used in the temples weigh between 10 and 20 tons, with some reaching heights of more than 3 meters. These blocks form curved walls, massive doorways, and intricate internal chambers arranged in a clover-shaped architectural layout typical of Maltese prehistoric temples. Moving stones of this size would be challenging even with modern equipment, yet the builders of Tarxian achieved it more than 5,000 years ago, with technologies that appear, at least on the surface, extremely limited. Archaeologists have found no evidence that the people of prehistoric Malta possessed iron tools, large draft animals, or even the wheel at the time the temples were constructed. In fact, the wheel did not appear in Europe until roughly 2,000 years later. This technological gap has led researchers to investigate alternative explanations for how such massive stones could have been transported across the landscape. One of the most intriguing clues emerged during excavations, when archaeologists discovered spherical limestone balls scattered near the temple complex. These objects, often about 10 to 15 centimeters in diameter, resemble primitive ball bearings. Some researchers believe that the builders of the Tarxian temples may have placed these stone spheres beneath heavy slabs to create a rolling platform, allowing large blocks to move more easily across prepared tracks. Experiments conducted by modern engineers have shown that similar systems can indeed reduce friction dramatically, making it possible for a relatively small group of people to move multi-ton stones. However, The exact method remains uncertain. While the spheres suggest a form of prehistoric engineering ingenuity, archaeologists have not yet found definitive evidence proving precisely how the system was organized, or whether it could reliably handle the largest stones in the complex. Furthermore, Malta's terrain raises additional questions. The island lacks extensive forests, meaning that the builders had limited access to large quantities of timber that might have been used for sledges, rollers, or scaffolding. This scarcity makes the logistics of transporting multi-ton stones across even short distances even more puzzling. Comparisons with other ancient megalithic sites highlight just how remarkable Tarxian's construction truly is. At Stonehenge, for example, some stones weighing around 25 tons were transported from quarries hundreds of kilometers away, likely using sledges and wooden rollers. Yet Stonehenge was built more than 1,000 years after Tarxian, and in a region rich in timber resources. Similarly, the Great Pyramid of Giza involved the movement of limestone blocks weighing several tons each, but Egyptian builders had access to copper tools, or organized labor forces numbering in the thousands, and sophisticated ramp systems. In contrast, the prehistoric society that constructed Tarxian appears to have been relatively small and technologically simple. Malta itself was never a vast civilization with massive populations. Estimates suggest that the entire island may have supported only a few thousand inhabitants during the temple building period. This raises another profound mystery. How could such a small community mobilize the labor and technical knowledge required to construct such monumental architecture? Archaeological investigations throughout the 20th century have revealed that Tarxian actually consists of 4 interconnected temples, each constructed during different phases over several centuries. Excavations carried out in the 1920s and later decades uncovered elaborate stone altars, carved reliefs, and fragments of colossal statues. Among the most famous discoveries is the lower half of a gigantic limestone statue believed to represent a fertility goddess, once standing more than 2.5 meters tall. The statue's finely carved drapery and smooth surfaces demonstrate a level of craftsmanship that seems surprisingly advanced for a Neolithic culture using stone tools. Yet the artistry of Tarxian extends far beyond sculpture. Many of the temple walls are decorated with intricate spiral carvings, among the most sophisticated prehistoric stone engravings ever discovered in Europe. These spirals are deeply incised into limestone slabs, arranged in repeating patterns that suggest careful planning and artistic tradition. Equally impressive is the architectural precision of the complex. The temples are arranged along a central axis and organized into symmetrical chambers connected by narrow passageways. Massive upright stones form doorways leading into apsidal rooms where ritual altars once stood. Some of these stones were shaped with surprising accuracy, creating smooth surfaces and carefully aligned edges. Archaeologists have noted that many of the blocks appear to have been carefully dressed and fitted together, suggesting an advanced understanding of stoneworking techniques. Even today, the walls maintain their structural integrity despite thousands of years of weathering. This durability indicates that the builders understood how to select suitable limestone and how to distribute weight effectively within the structure. Evidence discovered during excavations also suggests that Tarxian served as an important ritual and ceremonial center. Animal bones found near altars indicate that sacrifices were performed within the temples, possibly as part of fertility or seasonal ceremonies. Some archaeologists have proposed that the complex functioned as a sacred space where communities gathered for religious events, reinforcing social cohesion in prehistoric Maltese society. However, the exact belief system of the temple builders remains unknown, as they left behind no written records. Without texts or inscriptions, researchers must rely entirely on physical evidence to reconstruct the meaning of the site, Despite more than a century of research, the greatest enigma of Tarxian continues to revolve around its engineering. The transportation and placement of enormous stones remain only partially understood, and every new excavation seems to raise further questions. In recent years, advanced technologies such as laser scanning and three-dimensional modelling have allowed archaeologists to study the temples with unprecedented precision. These studies reveal subtle construction patterns and possible quarry sources for some of the stones, but they still do not fully explain how the builders managed the logistics of moving such massive blocks. What Tarxian ultimately demonstrates is that prehistoric societies may have possessed far more sophisticated engineering knowledge than we once believed. How do you think the builders of the Tarxian temples managed to move stone blocks weighing dozens of tons more than 5,000 years ago? Share your thoughts or theories in the comments below. In the scorching heat of southwestern Iran, where summer temperatures often rise above 45 degrees Celsius, the ruins of Bande Kaisar still cut across the Karun River like the spine of a forgotten machine. At first glance, it looks like the remains of a collapsed stone bridge. But hidden beneath the broken arches is one of the most advanced hydraulic engineering systems of the ancient world. A structure so complex that modern engineers still debate how people nearly 17 centuries ago managed to build it with such precision. What makes Bande Kaisar truly unsettling is not simply its age. It is the possibility that ancient builders understood water pressure, erosion control, and chemical durability at a level far beyond what historians once believed possible. The structure is located near the ancient city of Shushtar in present-day Iran, an area famous for its massive hydraulic network. Historians believe Bande Kaisar was constructed during the Sassanid Empire around the 3rd century CE, possibly after the Roman Emperor Valerian was captured by the Persian king Shapur I in 260 CE. According to several historical accounts, thousands of Roman soldiers and engineers may have been forced to work on the project after their defeat. If true, Bande Kaisar may represent one of the only surviving megastructures on Earth built through the direct fusion of Roman and Persian engineering traditions. The site first attracted serious archaeological attention during the 19th century, when explorers travelling through Persia noticed unusual stone foundations beneath the river. Early surveys revealed that the structure was not merely a bridge. It functioned simultaneously as a dam, a bridge, a water regulator, and part of a massive industrial hydraulic network. Even the Romans, famous for aqueducts and concrete harbours, rarely combined all these functions into a single integrated structure. Yet Bande Kaisar appears to have done exactly that. The bridge originally stretched nearly 500 metres across the Karun River and contained more than 40 arches. But its true purpose was not transportation. Its main role was controlling water flow. By partially blocking the river, the structure redirected enormous quantities of water into canals feeding the Shushtar hydraulic system. A gigantic network of tunnels, channels, basins and mills that transformed river energy into industrial power centuries before the Industrial Revolution. Some historians compare Shushtar to an ancient hydro-powered factory complex. But the deeper researchers studied Bande Kaisar, the more disturbing questions emerged. Bande Kaisar was only one component of a much larger hydraulic machine. The Shushtar system redirected river water through carefully calculated canals with extremely precise gradients. These channels powered dozens of watermills capable of grinding grain on an industrial scale. The slope angles had to be incredibly accurate. If the gradient was too steep, water velocity would become destructive, channels could collapse, and turbines would lose efficiency. If the slope was too shallow, water pressure would weaken, sediment would accumulate, and the entire system could fail. Modern hydraulic engineers use laser surveying equipment, digital modelling, and fluid simulations to design such systems. Ancient builders had none of these tools, yet the Schuster canals maintained remarkably stable water distribution across multiple sectors. Some researchers argue that centuries of practical experimentation may explain the achievement. Others believe the system suggests a surprisingly advanced mathematical understanding of hydraulic behaviour. One of the greatest mysteries surrounding Bandi Kaiser is the incredible durability of its mortar. Most ancient structures exposed continuously to moving water eventually fail. Modern concrete suffers from sulfate attack, mineral infiltration, micro-cracking, freeze-thaw cycles, and erosion. Even reinforced concrete bridges built in the 20th century often require major repairs after only 50 to 100 years. Yet parts of Bandi Kaiser survive nearly 1700 years under constant hydraulic stress. Laboratory analysis of surviving mortar samples revealed a sophisticated mixture containing lime, ash, clay, and silica-rich materials. Researchers noticed similarities with Roman pozzolanic concrete, the same volcanic ash-based material, responsible for the incredible durability of Roman harbours. But there is a major problem with that comparison. Iran does not naturally contain the same volcanic materials used extensively around the Bay of Naples in Italy. This raises a serious question. How did builders in ancient Persia create water-resistant mortar with such extraordinary long-term stability? Some material scientists believe the answer may lie in chemical reactions occurring slowly over centuries. Under microscopic examination, portions of the mortar show dense crystalline formations that appear to strengthen internal bonding over time. In other words, exposure to water may actually have improved parts of the structure instead of weakening them. This phenomenon resembles modern experimental self-healing concrete, a technology engineers today are still trying to perfect using bacteria, minerals, and chemical reactions. The fact that an ancient structure may exhibit similar behaviour is astonishing. Even more mysterious is how consistently the mortar survived across multiple sections exposed to different flow conditions. In fast-moving water, hydraulic forces usually grind surfaces apart over time, yet some portions of Bandi Kaiser still retain sharply bonded stone joints after centuries of river pressure. To modern civil engineers, this should not happen at such a scale without advanced material control. Several parts of the structure reveal possible erosion control strategies far ahead of their time. Rather than placing all stone blocks in perfectly flat alignment, some sections appear intentionally offset. This may have disrupted vortex formation and reduced direct water impact against vulnerable surfaces. Modern dam spillways use similar principles today. When fast-moving water strikes smooth surfaces continuously, cavitation can form microscopic vapor bubbles that explode under pressure, gradually destroying stone and concrete. Engineers spend enormous resources designing structures that minimize this effect. At Bandi Kaiser, ancient builders may have discovered practical anti-erosion techniques through observation alone. The arches themselves also remain controversial. Roman bridges typically relied on semicircular arches for weight distribution, while Persian hydraulic systems focused heavily on water diversion and irrigation management. Bandi Kaiser combines both approaches in a way rarely seen elsewhere in the ancient world. This hybrid design raises another mystery. Who exactly designed it? Was it primarily Roman engineers working under Persian control? Was it Persian architects adapting Roman methods? Or was it a collaborative engineering effort between two rival civilizations? No surviving blueprint exists. No construction manual remains. Almost everything historians know comes from fragments, structural analysis, and later historical references. Perhaps the most astonishing aspect of Bandikaysa was what it powered. Water from the dam was redirected through tunnels into massive mill complexes used to grind grain for local populations and possibly military forces. Some historians believe the system once operated dozens of mills simultaneously, requiring extremely precise flow and pressure control. In many ways, it functioned like a large-scale water-powered energy system nearly 1,500 years before modern hydroelectric dams. The more engineers study Bandikaysa, the more they realise ancient builders may have understood hydraulics, materials and structural durability at a level far beyond what we once imagined. Do you think Bandikaysa was simply the result of ancient experimentation, or evidence that lost engineering knowledge once existed far beyond what we imagine today? Share your thoughts in the comments below. Hidden beneath the dense tropical forests of southwestern Nigeria lies one of the most astonishing yet little-known engineering achievements of the ancient world, Sungbo's Eredo. Stretching across the landscape of Ogun State in a vast looping arc, this enormous earthwork system is widely believed to have been built by the ancestors of the Yoruba people sometime between the 8th and 10th centuries. At first glance, Sungbo's Eredo appears to be a simple earthen wall and ditch, yet archaeological investigations have revealed something far more extraordinary. The structure extends for roughly 160 kilometers, forming what is effectively one of the largest ancient man-made earthworks on Earth. In many sections, the ditch is between 10 and 15 meters deep, while the adjacent embankment rises as high as 20 meters above the surrounding terrain. When archaeologists began estimating the total volume of soil moved during construction, the numbers were staggering. Millions of cubic meters of laterite soil were excavated and piled into walls that still stand after more than 1,000 years. In terms of sheer labour, some researchers have suggested that the amount of earth moved rivals or even exceeds the material displaced in the construction of several monumental stone pyramids in Egypt. Yet unlike pyramids built in open desert landscapes, Sungbo's Eredo was constructed in a humid rainforest environment, where erosion, vegetation, and heavy rainfall constantly threatened to destroy exposed earth structures. The first systematic archaeological attention towards Sungbo's Eredo began during surveys in the late 20th century, particularly through the work of British archaeologist Patrick Darling, who conducted extensive fieldwork in the 1990s. Darling's research revealed that the earthwork was not a random accumulation of soil, but a carefully planned engineering system. The structure consists of a deep outer ditch, from which soil was extracted and then piled inward to create a towering rampart. This configuration is typical of defensive earthworks, yet the scale here is extraordinary. In some places, the ditch walls are cut almost vertically into the laterite soil, suggesting the builders possessed highly efficient excavation techniques. Archaeologists studying the site have also observed that the earthwork follows a remarkably consistent design across vast distances, despite crossing hills, valleys, and dense forest. Maintaining such structural continuity across more than 100 kilometers implies a sophisticated understanding of large-scale planning and landscape management. However, the most intriguing and least understood aspect of Sungbo's Eredo lies in its earth excavation technology and long-term structural stability. The soil in this region is primarily laterite, a reddish, iron-rich earth that becomes extremely hard when exposed to air, but is relatively soft when freshly cut. Laterite can be shaped easily at first, yet it is highly vulnerable to erosion from tropical rainstorms. In southwestern Nigeria, an annual rainfall often exceeds 1,500 millimeters. Over centuries, such intense rainfall would normally erode earthworks rapidly. Yet large sections of Sungbo's Eredo remain clearly visible today, even after more than a millennium of weathering. This raises an important question. How did ancient builders manage to construct an earthen monument that could survive in such an aggressive climate? Some archaeologists believe the builders exploited the natural properties of laterite soil in a surprisingly advanced way. When freshly excavated laterite is compacted and exposed to air, it gradually hardens into a durable crust similar to weak stone. Evidence from certain sections of the ramparts suggests the soil was deliberately layered and compressed during construction, possibly using wooden tools or trampling techniques to compact each layer. Over time, the iron-rich minerals within the soil would oxidize and cement the structure together. This process may explain why the embankments remain structurally coherent even after centuries of rainfall and vegetation growth. In other words, the builders may have unknowingly applied a form of natural soil stabilization technology. Even more puzzling is the apparent control of drainage along the earthwork. Tropical rain typically causes erosion gullies to form quickly in earthen structures, yet many segments of Sungbo's eredo show surprisingly limited erosion patterns. Some researchers have suggested that the builders intentionally designed the ditch and rampart geometry to redirect water flow away from the wall. The deep outer ditch may have acted not only as a defensive barrier, but also as a drainage channel that captured runoff during heavy rains. By guiding water into controlled pathways, the builders could have prevented destructive flooding from undermining the rampart. If this interpretation is correct, Sungbo's eredo represents not merely a massive excavation project, but also an early example of environmental engineering. The labor required for such an undertaking would have been enormous. Estimates based on ditch dimensions suggest that constructing the full length of the earthwork may have required moving tens of millions of cubic meters of soil. If a single worker could excavate roughly 1 cubic meter of soil per day using simple tools, the total labor requirement might reach tens of millions of workdays. This implies the coordinated effort of thousands of workers over many years, perhaps organized under a powerful regional authority. Yet archaeological evidence for such a centralized state during the proposed construction period remains limited. This discrepancy between the scale of the project and the known political structures of the time continues to puzzle historians. Adding to the mystery is the cultural tradition surrounding the monument. Local Yoruba legends associate the structure with a powerful noblewoman known as Bilikisu Sungbo, sometimes linked in folklore to the biblical Queen of Sheba. According to oral history, Sungbo was an extraordinarily wealthy ruler who commissioned the construction of the massive earthwork surrounding her domain. While historians treat this story cautiously, it highlights how deeply the monument is embedded in regional cultural memory. Today, Sungbo's eredo stands as one of the most extraordinary examples of ancient landscape engineering in Africa. Despite its immense scale, it remains far less famous than other monumental structures such as the Great Wall of China or the defensive earthworks of medieval Europe. Yet in terms of raw size and the volume of earth moved, Sungbo's eredo may rival many of these better-known constructions. Archaeological surveys, satellite imagery, and modern LiDAR mapping continue to reveal new sections hidden beneath vegetation, suggesting the monument may be even larger than originally believed. How did an ancient society more than 1,000 years ago build an earthwork this massive and make it survive in a tropical rainforest for centuries? Share your thoughts in the comments below.